Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a job that sounds thrilling, dangerous, and like a shortcut to riches, but is mostly about starving, stinking, and running for your life. Being a medieval thief sounded cool, but surviving it? You'd be lucky to make it through your first winter. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from in the comments and what time it is over there. I always love seeing who's joining this sleepy journey worldwide. Now, turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan if you enjoy that soft hum in the background, and let's slip gently into tonight's tale. You wake up in a wooden coop, straw beneath your back, a rooster perched proudly on your chest like it owns the place. There's no mattress, no blanket, just the damp smell of dirt, chicken droppings, and a suspicious itch on the back of your neck. Might be lice. It might be karma. You don't remember how you got here. No coins in your pocket, no shoes on your feet. There is no record of your existence in any civil registry, partly because those don't exist yet, and partly because no one ever bothered to count you. You're a speck of dust in the hungry winds of the 14th century. You leave the coop and find yourself on the edge of a tiny village. A few mud huts, a communal well, and some pantsless kids arguing over who can suck on a turnip the longest. In the distance, an older man is trying to converse with his cow. It doesn't seem to be going well. And you? You're starving. Not I skipped breakfast, hungry. This kind of hunger makes a wagon wheel look like a viable snack. The roar of your gut drowns out your stomach cramps, vision wobbles, and your heartbeat. You try to find work. But what can you do? Day laborer, already taken. Goose herder, fired because the geese were smarter than you. Manure scooper, requires experience. Eventually, you're invited to be an unpaid servant of God, which means joining a monastery, eating moldy bread, and praying not to starve. It's not the worst option, but something tells you you're not cut out for a life of silent reflection. You try picking up a fallen apple from someone else's yard. Within seconds, 3 women rush out, one with a broom, one with a soup ladle, and one armed only with her extensive vocabulary of insults. The apple drops. So do you, to the ground after taking a ladle to the neck. Conclusion: it is not worth it. And then, lying there on the village edge, sleeves flapping in the wind, stomach doing a war drum solo, a thought flashes in your mind. What if you became a thief? You sit up like hope just punched you in the ribs. If everyone's starving, everyone has something to protect, and you, having nothing, could become the one who takes. But what to steal? From whom? And where? You scan the village. The first house you eye has its door slightly open, soup steaming on the hearth. But guarding the entrance is a goose. It looks at you like it graduated top of its class from Guard Goose Academy. You change your mind. The common folk? Too poor. Sometimes you'd steal something and feel so bad you'd want to return it. The nobles? Guard dogs. Armed men. Moats. Bad idea. In the distance, a manor house rises. Stone towers and red-tiled roofs. Rumor says they have cheese wheels the size of a priest's foot, bread loaves as long as a soldier's arm, and enough wine to swim in. But you've also heard the penalty for thieves. Stripped naked, dunked in freezing water, and hung at the village gate as a polite public message to work harder, steal less. Yeah, I'm not quite ready for that. You need something smaller. A single egg, a lonely onion, a slightly stale pastry is forgotten behind a market stall. You spot a quiet-looking hut. The door isn't locked. You slip inside, light as smoke, light as guilt before it's earned. In the corner, there's a cloth sack smelling faintly of grain. Oats, maybe. You creep toward it, and step on a cat. It screeches. A child screams. Within 3 seconds, you're being chased by an older woman with a measuring stick and a bald, vengeful rooster. You run. No time to think. There is no time for regret. Only your survival instincts scream, "Farewell, Oats." You dive behind a bush, panting, heart pounding, legs aching like you just ran a marathon, in a world that hasn't invented marathons yet. And as you sit there, catching your breath, you wonder, was this your first step to becoming a real thief? No money, no experience, no plan. Just a growling stomach, a fresh cat scratch, and a growing list of things not to try again. And somehow, from that exact moment, you've started down a path that very few ever walk away from, at least not with all their original teeth. The next morning, you wake up with your back aching from sleeping in a bush, the same one you dove into after your failed petty theft internship last night. The cold wind seeps through your torn shirt, and it feels like a family of bedbugs is reuniting inside your collar. The empty stomach is still your number one problem. You sigh and glance toward the village across the stream, the only place where you might find food or a scolding served with moldy bread. You decide to try again. I am not stealing this time. Yesterday was humiliating enough. Today, you'll try honest work. Sounds better, right? No geese chasing, cats scratching, or old ladies waving rulers at your head. You approach the village with your best, "I'm harmless, I need a job, and I no longer steal onions" face. The first person you meet is an old farmer, his face a landscape of wrinkles, currently shoveling cow dung. You ask, "Excuse me, sir, do you need a worker?" He scans you from head to toe like he's assessing a lame mule, then snorts, "Yeah, shovel dung. From now till sundown, you'll get a bowl of thin porridge, no salt." You consider it for a second. It seems better than starving. You agree. And so begins your first day as an honest laborer in medieval times. The job? Shoveling cow dung from the barn to a larger pile of dung nearby. Repeat for 14 hours. No gloves, no shoes. The smell? You'll be dreaming about it for years. Flies swarm you like you're a buffet open 24/7. At some point you wonder, is this karma from a past life? At noon, it's meal break. Standing in the shade and receiving a bowl of porridge so watery, you wonder if it's just recycled dishwater. There's a single strand of something that might be a vegetable or grass. You eat it all anyway. Then lick the bowl. Then sigh. The afternoon is more dung. The sun blazes, the flies buzz louder, your back burns, and the smell, well, let's not go back there. By nightfall, you're barely standing. Your arms are shaking, your legs are jelly, and you're covered in organic fertilizer. The farmer says, almost kindly, "Be back tomorrow." 4 a.m., you can sleep in the goose shed. The goose shed. And as if the universe wanted to make a point, last night's goose appears at the door, staring at you unblinking. It remembers you as the intruder who trespassed near its oat stash. You sit down, back against a pile of straw, and start to realize a painful truth. Honest work here isn't poor but noble. It's poor, exhausted, and still assumed guilty. The next morning, you return. Not out of love for labor, but because thin porridge still beats the sound of your stomach's angry growling. Today, your job is to weed the garden. Sounds easier than shoveling dung until you discover the catch. The garden is full of nettles. You know nettles, right? The plants look innocent but sting like a curse if you touch them. Within an hour, your hands are red, swollen and itching like a medieval plague. You start scratching so frantically it sounds like you're summoning extinct rodents. At noon, another bowl of thin porridge. Today, there's a tiny chunk of potato in it. You almost cry. It might also be the wind blowing dust into your eyes. That afternoon, you drop a sickle on your foot. It doesn't break a bone, but it hurts enough to make you say words the priest wouldn't approve of. That night, you don't sleep in the goose shed. You choose the open yard just to avoid the judgmental stares of poultry. You lie on your back, look up at the stars, and ask the universe, is this what honest living feels like? On day 3, you're scolded for inconsistent dung shoveling. You're sent home early on day 4 because it rained, and you got the precious straw wet, which also means no porridge today. On day 5, you're accused of hiding a potato in your sleeve. Truth is, you were just scratching your rash, but no one believes you. Who would think of someone like you? Ragged clothes, dirty face, no name. No one wants to know your name. And so you're fired. No pay, no porridge, no goodbye, just a light kick from the goose. You suspect it was a matter of professional ethics. You drag yourself out of the village, covered in sweat, soil, and shame. The cold wind finds its way through your torn clothes again. Hunger returns like an unwelcome old friend. You sit beneath a tree. Night falls. There are no stars tonight. Your stomach growls with a majestic echo. And then it hits you. Stealing was never a career choice. It was a survival instinct. You don't want to be hit and/or chased, or do anything wrong. But when right means endless toil, scolding, and hunger, wrong suddenly feels easier. You know you're standing at the edge of a line. One more step, and you're not just a hungry fool anymore. You're a proper thief. And that line smells faintly of porridge. Very thin, very bland. You think stealing means sneaking into someone's house, grabbing something valuable and running like a pack of wolves is on your tail. But in medieval times, theft was such a flexible concept it could give you a headache. You could be called a thief for picking up a fallen apple, staring too long at a potato, or even breathing too hard near a loaf of unsold bread. No joke. You try entering a new village, still clinging to some sliver of hope that honest work might still be an option. As you pass by the garden of a wealthy landowner, you spot a single apple lying under a tree. Just one apple, round and unattended. It practically whispers to you, "Eat me, I'm so alone." You bend down and gently pick it up. You haven't even sniffed it yet, when a voice shrieks, "Thief! He took my apple." A woman comes barreling out of the house with a ladle. Behind her is the landowner himself, red-faced and holding a stick. Even a kid joins the pursuit, though it has no idea what's going on. It's armed with an onion, just in case. You're stunned. The apple fell. You picked it up. You didn't bite it. You weren't planning to plant it and claim it on your taxes. But no. Here, everything belongs to someone. The tree belongs to the landowner. The apple belongs to the tree. Therefore, the apple belongs to the landowner even if it has fallen, even if you're the only one who noticed it all morning. You get caught. Not handcuffed. Handcuffs weren't exactly trending in this era, but held firmly and dragged into the village square like you'd stolen a royal crown. Soon, a crowd gathers. An old man mutters, "Stealing apples, huh? I used to do that too, but I was faster." A woman sighs. You can just tell he lacks morals by his face. A dog barks. You're unsure if it's angry or just vibing, but it adds to your guilt. You try to explain, "It fell. I just picked it up." But here the explanation is weaker than ownership. And ownership trumps all logic. A village tribunal is hastily formed. It consists of 3 people: the landowner, the victim, the priest, supposedly neutral but currently eating one of the landowner's apples, and the blacksmith. He owns a chair, so he's qualified. You're charged with trespassing on property. After 3 minutes of deliberation, your sentence is handed down. Kneel at the village gate for 3 hours holding a wooden sign that reads, "I stole an apple." There's no appeal, no lawyer, no translator, not even water. Just a sign, a boiling forehead, and a chicken that occasionally pecks your leg with judgment. In those 3 hours, you learn a lot. Some people walk past and laugh. Some sigh with pity. One even asks for half the apple you never got to eat. A few children throw straws at your head like a carnival game. Hit his forehead, and your wish comes true. You're not angry, just tired. After 3 hours, you're pardoned, with a final warning. Next time you pick anything up, even a chestnut, expect the whip. You leave the village. No apple, no dignity. But one more valuable life lesson. In the Middle Ages, nothing is ever truly up for grabs. Everything, even trash, already belongs to someone. Along the road, you spot a fish by the riverbank, clearly fallen from a net. It flops weakly. No one's around. Your stomach grumbles, but you remember the sign, the chicken. The old man's words, "If you can't outrun them, don't pick it up." You walk past the fish. You refuse a meal for the first time in your life, not out of ethics, but out of fear. Then you hear a rumor. There's a small market far away, poorly guarded. The vendors are tired. Goods fall often. And best of all, if you accidentally pick something up, just pretend to be blind. A flicker of hope glimmers like a candle in the dark. Maybe you don't have to become a professional thief, just someone who's opportunistic, clever, hungry, quick. But then you wonder, if even picking up an apple earns you punishment, is there any path left for someone with nothing to survive honorably? You look up at the sky, gray clouds, cold wind, the scent of wood smoke mingled with cow dung. Another day like any other, but you have changed. You're no longer someone simply looking for work, no longer the guy hoping it'll be fine. You're now someone who knows. Sometimes, just existing without being accused is a victory. And maybe, just maybe, this is the real first step of a reluctant thief. After the apple theft treated like a bank robbery incident, you begin to learn the first real lesson of being a thief. Not everything is worth stealing. But the cruel truth in the Middle Ages? The first thing you need to steal is your expectations. You no longer dream of silver, jewels, or even a loaf of bread. At this point, if you could swipe a torn blanket to crawl under without having turnips thrown at you, you'd feel like your luck had turned. But here's the dilemma. What do you even steal when the villagers are poorer than you? You head back to another village. This one seems to have fewer geese. As you arrive, you tread softly, speak politely, and even help an old lady carry a basket of carrots, only to realize later the basket is empty. And then, you observe. A simple wattle and daub cottage with a door that's a curtain. Inside, a few items lie in plain sight. A dented cooking pot, a pair of worn wooden clogs, and a bundle of straw, which could double as a pillow or even a mattress if you're flexible enough. You do the mental math. If you take the pot, it's theft of household goods. The clogs, theft of transport. The straw, technically free, but probably not worth carrying. And if someone notices you stealing straw, that's just sad. You sit by the village well, pondering. Who can you steal from when everyone owns less than nothing? An older woman walks by, hugging a basket of turnips. She looks at you. You nod. She nods back. Then she hands you the smallest turnip she has. Take it. You look half dead. You're surprised. Something in your chest softens. You bite into the turnip. It's hard as a brick. You suspect it predates Charlemagne's childhood. You realize that stealing from villagers isn't just immoral, it's impractical. Their only possession is sheer will to live. And unfortunately, you can't stuff willpower in a sack and sell it at the next town over. You stroll through the village lanes, peeking into homes. In one, 3 generations of a family share a single roasted onion. In another, a father patches his child's shirt with twine and sheer determination. You see a kid playing with a cat. Its toy is a smooth stone. The way it laughs, you'd think it was the crown jewels. That's when you know. You can't be the one to take the last joy from people who have nothing else. You don't want to become that kind of thief, the one who steals a grandmother's last bowl of gruel, or hides the only piece of chalk used to teach the village kids. But you're still hungry. You remember a quote you once heard. Too poor to be stolen from, too rich to be believed. In this village, the first half is certainly true. The second, you'll have to travel far to test that one. And then, you hear about the monastery bakery. They bake bread every morning for the monks, and there are often leftover loaves. They set them outside for people in need. Low-income people come to ask or just accidentally stroll by and pick one up. You set off at once. It's a half-day walk in the scorching sun, with the wind carrying the scent of fertilizer. But your stomach leads the way, and your brain is full of thoughts of flour, yeast, and hope. When you arrive, it's just as described. A stone table outside with 3 slightly burnt loaves. Probably the rejects. No guards, no eyes. You inch closer, hand trembling. And just then, a voice booms from a second-floor window. God sees everything, my child. You freeze, no footsteps, no movement, just a voice, and the unsettling sense of divine eyes trained on your soul. You look up. It's an old monk calmly hanging laundry. His face is unreadable, like someone who's delivered that line 1,000 times. He probably has. You nod awkwardly, drop the loaf, and start backing away. Then the monk adds, "Take it. I'm just teasing." You turn back. He winks. You grab the loaf and walk away, emotionally scrambled, grateful, embarrassed, and mildly annoyed. Because you realize you didn't even manage to steal it before getting called out. Your thieving career so far? 0 trophies. The apple got you punished. The fish got left behind. The bread got heaven's attention. And the villagers? Too poor to lose anything in the first place. You sit at the edge of a field, nibbling your burnt bread, mind spinning with questions. If you want to steal something worthwhile, you need to aim higher. Not poor folks, not leftovers, but people who have things. And slowly, like the sun glinting off the burnt crust of your bread, the answer dawns on you. Yes. And that's when you start thinking about the nobles. After days of picking up fallen turnips, passing on dying fish, and hesitating even with burnt bread, you come to one clear conclusion. If you want to steal something worthwhile, you've got to aim for the nobility. And that's when you realize you've just thought the same thought as hundreds of poor souls before you, most of whom didn't live long enough to tell the tale. You start observing. On the edge of town stands a massive manor. Tall stone walls, iron gates, and 2 guard dogs, larger than the calf you once shared sleeping space with back in the village. This is the estate of the local lord, a man so important that, according to villagers, even his farts get chronicled for posterity. You eye the gate. Climbing is out of the question. The iron bars are tall, spiked, and studded with jagged shards of pottery that scream, "Go ahead! Try me, peasant!" You circle the perimeter. There are no cracks in the wall except a drainage pipe. Narrow, damp, and smelling like a pig's intestine soaked in vinegar. But possibly an entry point. You mark it. You're not rushing in. You need a plan. You start gathering intel. What's inside? Rumors say wine cellars, silver cabinets, honey-glazed pastries, embroidered slippers, hand towels made from imported Venetian linen. Hearing about it makes your stomach grumble. Steal it already. But then you hear about the punishments. One young man once stole a silver spoon, got caught. Punishment? He hung upside down, covered in pine resin, and left it for the flies to educate him about summer pain. An older woman took half a loaf of bread and claimed she found it in the garden. 40 lashes. Then forced to kneel in the market for 3 days with a wooden sign reading, "I stole from God to feed my belly." A boy picked up an old comb. It turned out it had fallen from the lady's carriage. He didn't even get to explain. They locked him in a wooden cage and hung him from a tower like some kind of human bell. You shiver, but greed paces behind you like a hungry cat, waiting. Then, one night, you decide to conduct a field survey, sneaking near the estate wall under the cover of darkness. You crawl through thorny bushes, creeping like a stiff-legged cat. You reach the gate. The guards are snoring, a flicker of hope. You peek through the bars. Inside, candlelight flickers over a recently cleared feast. Silver plates, discarded chicken bones, and a half-finished goblet of wine. You swallow hard. Honestly, you'd be happy just licking the rim of one of those plates. Then, woof, you turn. The 2 guard dogs. One black as coal, the other white as milk, both the size of a church bench. They stare at you like you're a warm dessert with legs. No time to think. You run. And you discover a painful truth. The ground surrounding the manor is lined with gravel, the kind specifically designed to stab the bare feet of intruders. You trip, scrape your knees, roll into a ditch. The stench hits you like a noble's slap. Sewage, shame, and last night's goose stew. You lie there, bruised, filthy, humiliated. The dogs keep barking. Guards shout. A bell rings. You don't know if you're being hunted or if the gods just punish you for bad ideas. But you know this. Castle infiltration is not a hobby for the hungry, but cowardly. You crawl out of the ditch, dignity lost somewhere in the mud. You don't sleep that night, partly from the cold, mostly because the dogs are still barking. The next morning, you sit on the edge of the woods trying to think it all through. Steal from people with low incomes? there's nothing to take. Steal from the rich, you risk losing your dignity, your freedom, and possibly your front teeth. You understand that thieving isn't about picking the right target. It's a risky, brutal business, not for anyone who values peace or unbroken skin. A wild idea crosses your mind. Maybe go back to honest work? Then you remember. Honest work means flavorless porridge, dung without gloves, and daily verbal abuse. Stealing? It's dangerous, exhausting, and comes with hourly verbal abuse. You sigh. At this time, your options are limited. No land, no steady job, no helpful relatives, no identification, because that hasn't been invented yet. You survive by instinct, and your instinct now whispers, be smarter, be faster, and never go near two-toned dogs again. You wipe your face, stand up, and look toward the next town, where there's an old church, a few bakeries, and, according to rumor, one of the last cheap places to sleep for wanderers like you. You don't know what you'll steal next. But you do know one thing. Every time you survive a failed plan, you're one step closer to becoming a real thief. After your unfortunate run-in with the hounds and a medieval ditch smell no soap could ever cure, you decide to lower your ambitions. No more castles, no more dreams of grand treasures, no more chasing glory. Now, you're aiming for an onion. Yes, one single onion. Not because you love the smell, not because you're planning to make stew, but simply because you haven't eaten anything proper in 3 days, and the scent wafting from a vegetable cart just rolled by has you crying, possibly from hunger or an actual eye sting. A vegetable vendor is pulling the cart, a wiry older woman with a squeaky wooden wheel and a garden's worth of produce. Pale turnips, a few limp cabbages, and a glorious mountain of dried onions. When she stops to chat with a friend at the market entrance, you notice a lone onion tumble down and land on the dusty road, forgotten. No one sees, no one cares. The onion lies there waiting for fate, and fate, unfortunately, is you. You approach, gently pick it up. Haven't even tucked it into your shirt yet when a voice explodes across the market. Thief! He took my onion! It's her. Eyes sharp as a hawk, voice like a cathedral bell. Within 3 seconds, your collar is grabbed. You're dragged to the market square and a crowd starts forming as if it's festival day. You try to explain, it fell. I was just picking it up to return. The vendor crosses her arms. Then why were you hiding it behind your back? You mumble. Your hunger has dulled your reflexes. Your mouth is dry as parchment. And someone standing nearby clearly saw you attempting to pocket it. The town's unofficial justice panel assembles at once. The local apothecary/market judge declares, I saw him loitering near the fish stall. A woman selling yarn nods. You can tell by his face he's shifty. You know this is unwinnable. Logic doesn't beat first impressions. Your first impression is a muddy face, tattered clothes, and shoes that smell like betrayal. The punishment? No lashes this time. There are children present. So your sentence is educational. They hang an onion garland around your neck. Yes, a necklace made of dried scallions. And make you stand at the market gate, shouting every half hour, I'm sorry for stealing an onion. Kids laugh so hard they nearly fall over. A goose waddles by and takes a bite of your onion necklace, clearly unfazed by social shame. An older woman pauses to observe. For a second, you think she'll show pity. But no. She says, when I was young, I went hungry too. But I learned to grow onions, not steal them. You want to respond, lady, I don't even have a shovel. But you swallow the words, and the onion stench is permanently fused to your soul. After 3 hours, you're released. Your neck aches from the tight straw rope. Your hands are numb from standing. Your pride is non-existent. And the saddest part? You're still hungry. The onion, half-eaten by a goose. You collapse near the road, sighing. An older man walks by, leans down, and whispers, next time, try picking up a potato. People don't guard those as much. You half smile. I'm unsure if it's a joke or a professional tip. That night, you wander to the forest's edge, where a few goat herders live. No one kicks you out. No one offers anything either. But someone, maybe out of fear or mercy, leaves a bowl of porridge on a windowsill. You eat it. No salt, barely warm. But you swear it's the best thing you've ever tasted. You stare up at the night sky. The stars are faint, the breeze gentle, and next to you, the half-onion rests like a quiet witness to your latest humiliation. You start to understand that in this world, thievery isn't about stealing gold or livestock. It's about taking anything that wasn't explicitly given, and not given is the default setting of medieval society. Everyone's poor, everyone's suspicious, and if you're holding something, you must have stolen it. You don't know what to do anymore. You can't work. Nobody trusts you. You can't beg. Nobody has anything. You can't even steal, because even onions have guardians. You curl up in a hay pile behind the goat pen, clutching the half-onion like it's a family heirloom, and think quietly to yourself, maybe it's time to steal something else entirely. Like a new identity. You've been hungry. You've suffered. You've been pecked by chickens, chased by dogs, and pelted with sanctified carrots by public opinion. And now, after nearly being canonized in reverse for stealing an onion, your thoughts turn to the one place no one dares steal from, the church. It sounds wild, but you've heard rumors. The church keeps beeswax candles, which can light your way and be eaten if you don't mind a stomachache. Communion wafers, grape wine, gold-threaded vestments, and most tempting of all, the offering box. Sometimes it's said to hold more coins than the village chief's purse. Only problem? God. You're not sure what you believe, but in an age where every sneeze is interpreted as divine punishment, you're not eager to test the patience of someone who controls plagues, thunder, and the exact number of bedbugs in your boots. But hunger bends both morals and faith. It whispers to you all night, just a little theft. No one will know. Communion bread is still bread, right? Wine has calories too. At dawn, you sneak down the cobblestone path toward the monastery. The air is still, and dew clings to the grass. The church bell tolls, deep and solemn, as if warning anyone with impure intentions, like you. You slip behind the chapel. There's a small door the monks use to reach the garden. You hide behind a statue of Saint Jerome, a man known for mercy, though the icy stone glare doesn't promise much forgiveness today. The door creaks open. Inside is a storage room, filled with candles, folded linen, a few bottles of ceremonial wine, and a locked wooden box. You offer a half-hearted prayer, then slip inside. You grab a candle. Your hands tremble. The beeswax smells better than any salted porridge you've ever imagined. You dig further. A dry communion wafer, crisp as parchment. But to you, it might as well be a sugar-glazed bun. And then your eyes fall on the offering box. Not greed, just the thought. Maybe there are a few coins, enough for a real meal, or at least a handkerchief. You reach for it, and the moment your fingers touch the wood, "What are you doing here, my child?" You freeze. A monk stands in the doorway, thin, solemn, with a beard like an arrow pointing straight at your conscience. He's holding a bundle of books. His face isn't angry, just disappointed. The kind of disappointment your parents had when you broke the only family bowl. You stammer. You glance at the candle, at the box, at the statue behind you, as if hoping Saint Jerome might intervene. The monk steps closer, eyes on the candle in your hand. Then, gently, "Are you hungry?" You nod. No more excuses. Your throat tightens. Not from emotion, but because the wafer is still half stuck halfway down your gullet. He sighs, then sits on a wooden bench. He speaks softly of sin and redemption. He doesn't yell, it doesn't strike. It just tells a story. About a young man long ago who once stole communion bread and later became the monastery librarian. Whether through repentance or just wanting easier access to the book vault is unclear. You listen. You nod. And you're allowed to leave. under one condition. For the next week, you'll clean every bench and table in the chapel. In return, you'll get 3 bowls of porridge a day, with salt, and a place to sleep by the hearth. You accept immediately, not out of guilt, but because salted porridge. Over the next 7 days, you move like a shadow, dusting, sweeping, avoiding eye contact, and not touching the donation box again. You discover something strange. Even though you're not entirely convinced of divine punishment, your chest feels lighter every time you sweep near the Virgin Mary statue. Maybe it's the full stomach, perhaps it's fewer lightning-related anxieties. At night, you sleep soundly, not because the blankets are soft, but because for the first time in months, you don't dream about being chased. But don't get it twisted. You haven't turned over a new leaf. You've merely postponed your criminal ambitions, temporarily. Because even as you eat well and sleep warm, you still glance toward the Father's chambers, the room behind the oak door, the one with the key to the monastery's treasury, the room that, according to your stomach's latest sermon, holds better wine than silver. Blessed, glittering silver. And that night, your dreams return. A week of scrubbing church benches taught you 2 things. 1, you hate the smell of damp wood. 2, you don't belong anywhere with bells, robes, and people who say Amen too often. So when the monks gently encouraged you to leave, after you accidentally dropped a lit candle onto the head priest's ceremonial robe, you weren't all that surprised. And just like that, you're back to the mud, the wind, and the official scent of the Middle Ages, stale sweat with livestock notes. This time, you don't beg for work. You don't knock on doors asking for porridge. You don't even touch vegetables anymore, especially the ones that could trigger cries of thief. Instead, you enter a profession no one hires for, no one teaches, and yet always has openings for the desperate. Full-time petty theft. Your first tool of the trade? A ripped sack you found near the horse manure pile. Your uniform? A tunic stitched together with string, a pair of rough burlap trousers, and 2 brave bare feet. Your bed? Wherever it's dry, not too spiky, and free of geese. On your first night as a professional thief, you curl up in an abandoned hayloft outside the village. The hay stinks, but it's warm. There are mice. There are bugs. An elderly cat glares at you like, I was here first. But you don't care. You rest your head on a lump of straw, hug your empty sack, and sleep. The next morning you wake up itchy all over. The hay is stiff. Possibly you slept on an ant colony, or a lice convention. Either way, you're still alive, which feels like a win. You start practicing your craft, slowly, carefully. You steal only the kinds of things no one notices. Nothing big, nothing flashy. It was small enough to pretend it was on the ground if caught. At the market, you pretend to be a porter. When someone drops a turnip, you swoop. When the vendor's distracted, you borrow a bit of cheese the size of your pinky nail. Once, you stole what you thought was a knob of butter, only to discover it was pig fat for blister ointment. You stop being picky. You become part of the town without ever being welcomed into it. You slip through the crowd like a shadow. No one knows your name. But people start whispering, it's that one. The guy who's always picking things up. Your clothes are the same ones you started with. Once gray. Now a proud shade of muddy brown greenish. You wash by standing in the rain. The result? A lingering damp stink and stains that defy explanation. You develop new skills. Tuck a turnip into your sleeve without it plopping out mid-step. How can you cough loud enough to distract a vendor when accidentally grabbing a bread roll? How do you smile politely when suspected while mentally mapping the nearest exit? You sleep somewhere different every night. Old huts, abandoned barns, dry tree roots. Once, you passed out in a hay cart and woke up half a mile away, thanks to an unsuspecting horse. You gain a reputation, not as dangerous, just inconvenient. Some people curse at you, some feel pity, some offer you an onion, after confirming you didn't already steal one. One day, you steal a pair of wool socks. Technically, You found them on a fence with no one around. You slide them into your sack like you just robbed a noble. They don't fit. One has a hole, but you wear them like the king himself hand-delivered them. And that's when it hits you. You're no longer the trembling rookie thief. Now you walk lightly, scan, and shrug like a pro. But with that realization comes a truth. This job has no vacations. You can't let people remember your face. You can't make friends unless you enjoy being robbed by your friends. You can't leave traces. You can't smell good, a sign you've recently done well. You live like a hungry, grimy shadow in the same clothes for weeks. The fabric starts to rot. The hems unravel. One day you snag yourself on a branch, tearing your tunic. You sew it up with twine and a quiet promise to stay alive at least 3 more days. But in all this chaos, you find something the honest folk don't have. A strange kind of freedom. No one bosses you around. No one hands you a shovel. No one tells you what time to wake up. You're sneaky. You're starving. But you're you, in an oddly liberating way. That night, you lie back in your usual hay pile, clutching your sack, still empty, and ask yourself, is this my life now? You're not sure. But you know one thing. You'll wake up early tomorrow. You'll wander through the market. You'll keep your eyes peeled for anything forgotten, dropped, or left behind. And if you're lucky, it'll be a honey cake from a noblewoman's basket, and not your 17th onion. Being a medieval thief comes with a cruel paradox. To avoid being noticed, you must be invisible. And to be invisible, you need to be clean, odorless, and tidy. Unfortunately, being clean, odorless, and tidy are 3 things you do not possess. After a month of petty theft, sleeping in the hay, and wearing exactly one outfit, at this point setting a personal best for the longest time unwashed, you begin to notice that something is happening to your scent. At first you don't think much of it. Everyone in this era smells. Medieval folks lived in stench the way fish lived in water. But gradually, you notice the side effects of your aroma. Passers-by start backing away when you get too close. Dogs no longer bark, they whimper and walk off. And once, while walking past a couple mid-kiss, the woman suddenly stopped and asked, "What died around here?" You wanted to say, "My hope. I hope to be a normal person." But you stayed silent, because you smelled it too. And yes, it did resemble rotten turnips inside a sock. The odor comes from many places. Clothes smeared with mud, grease, and what might be 2-week-old cheese. Sweat that seems to ferment. You suspect your skin is brewing ale. Hair that has become more nest than style. And even birds aren't interested. You try to wash your face in the stream. It works, technically. But even the water seems to flee. Your skin peels from the weather and lack of soap. You itch everywhere. And the more you itch, the more the smell spreads. One morning, you enter the market early, aiming for a breadcrumb at the back stall. As you sneak forward, the vendor, without turning around, yells, "Get lost! I smell you!" You freeze. No one said your name, but everyone knows your scent. You try another stall. A cheerful young onion vendor is joking with a customer. You attempt to pinch an onion, again with the onions, and he suddenly sniffs, turns, and says, "Wait a second. I know that smell." You bolt. You sit beneath the old oak by the village path that night, reflecting. You used to think thievery failed because people were too alert. But now you know, they don't need eyes. Their noses are doing the work. You make a decision. A big one. You're going to bathe. You head to a forest stream, the one where ducks usually swim. You strip, which causes the ducks to abandon ship, and slowly step into the icy water. It stings, but it's refreshing. You scrub with river stones. You mash up leaves and use them as primitive soap. The result, slightly cleaner skin and several new scrapes. You wash your clothes by slapping them against a rock. Too hard. A new tear appears. You sigh, muttering, "Even rips deserve to be symmetrical." You hang your shirt on a branch to dry and sit nearby, watching the sky. For a moment, just a moment, you feel human again. Not a thief. Not a fugitive. It's not a walking warning sign for nasal cavities. Then you realize you're naked in the woods, and you hear footsteps. You grab your pants, toga wrap them around your waist, and duck behind a bush. Luckily, it's just an old woodcutter. He sniffs the air, frowns, and mutters, "What's that smell?" "Rotting tree." You flinch. Even after bathing, you're still detectable. That night, you return to your usual hay pile. Your clothes are still damp. You put them on anyway. Cold, clingy, but slightly better smelling. At least now you don't smell like something cursed. The next day, you return to the market. No one flinches at a 10-foot radius for the first time in weeks. A major win. You approach the bread stall. No shouting, no pinched noses. You help an older man restack a basket of turnips and gently snap off the corner of an abandoned bread crust. Success. You smile. No one notices. You walk away. Not because of your stealth, but because of your new smell. But you know it won't last. Clean scent has a 48-hour lifespan in your life. You have no soap, no spare clothes, and your haybed still smells like wet goat and regret. You start thinking bigger. You need new clothes. But to get them, you'll have to steal. And to steal clothes, you'll have to approach someone's home. And you already know, stealing from peasants is no joke. While they may be poor, they have chickens. And chickens never forgive. Someone once said, "Dogs are man's best friend." That might be true, if you're a man with a house, food, and a name. But dogs are the most terrifying snitches in the medieval world if you're a rag-wearing wanderer, surviving on crusts and suspicious glances at other people's potatoes. Medieval dogs weren't pampered purse poodles. These beasts were calf-sized, bristle-furred, fang-filled creatures trained to spot anyone who didn't belong. Which means you. You learned this hard while approaching a modest house on the village outskirts. Your goal was humble, a woven basket that might have once held onions. You had no plans to steal onions. The basket just looked promising. You were slipping quietly past the wooden fence when you heard a faint noise behind you. You turned. Nothing. Then you looked down. Two glowing yellow eyes stared at you from under the table. No growl, no bark. Just waiting. You froze. Your heart thudded like Easter Mass drums. You began slowly stepping back, silent as fog. Then the dog barked. Woof! A loud, echoing sound that makes windows shiver and villagers rise like bees. A woman rushed from the house, wielding a wooden spoon. Behind her came her husband in a hat made of rabbit pelts. And the child, clearly born into this drama, launched a turnip at you without hesitation. You didn't stick around to see if it hit. You ran. Of course, the dog chased you. This wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. After a few similar incidents, you created a personal law of survival. Where there is food, there is a dog. And where there is a dog, there is no you. Once, you were resting near a horse stable, far from the main house, and the family dog still caught wind of your scent. It barked for 10 minutes until the owner came out and dumped used vegetable washing water on you as a farewell gesture. You started testing friendship tactics. You whispered from afar, "Here, boy, good dog, soft belly." Result, louder barking. You tossed breadcrumbs like bribes. The dog ate them, then barked even harder. You tried confusing its nose with your stench. "Maybe I smell so bad it'll mistake me for horse dung." But it turns out medieval dogs were well trained. They could distinguish clearly between thief and manure. You once hid inside a hay barrel. The dog sniffed once and barked with certainty. It didn't even need to see you. It heard your heartbeat like a guilty drum. One night, you lay near an abandoned brick kiln, thinking you were safe. But across the wind, you heard barking. In sequence, from dog to dog, like a medieval canine telegraph. Thief here. Thief here. You realized dogs were the kingdom's most reliable security system. They didn't get paid. They didn't take holidays. They never forgot your scent. And most importantly, they were loyal to everyone but you. You once tried befriending a stray. You fed it some burnt crust. It sat beside you quietly. You dared to hope you'd found an ally. But the next day, it was following a meat vendor instead, because she had real bones. Being betrayed by a stray dog? That humbles you. One time, you even tried hiding in a chicken coop. You thought you were clever. The dog barked outside. You stayed silent. Then the chickens noticed you. They freaked out. I started clucking like the apocalypse. The dog barked louder. And you were dragged out by a man holding a chicken and a club. He didn't hit you. He just asked, "Why would you pick a job even dogs despise?" You had no answer. You didn't choose this life. Hunger chose for you. And this life came with dogs. You developed a new strategy. Avoid homes entirely. Stick to markets where dogs are tied. You began mapping them out like experts. White fur, droopy ears, looks gentle, secretly evil. Black fur, blind in one eye. Barks endlessly, but chases in zigzags. Yellow with brown spots, the traitor, once pretended to befriend you, then bit your pants. One night, sleeping near the forest edge, you heard a distant barking chorus. You smiled faintly, whispered to no one, "Good night, my friends. Tomorrow I'll steal somewhere with no paws." Then you drifted off, clutching your ragged sack, dreaming of a peaceful land where dogs had no noses. After humiliating failures involving guard dogs, wild mutts, and even a treacherous stray that chose meat over loyalty, you returned to the idea you once dismissed outright: breaking into someone's home. You know it's a terrible idea. Peasants might be poor, but they have something more terrifying than guards, chickens, and not the dumb, docile kind you once imagined. No, medieval chickens are a different breed entirely. Feathered warriors, palace-grade security, and unerringly accurate when aiming for the face, but you're out of options. That night, your stomach growls like a choir warming up for Judgment Day. All you have left is a single raw potato, gnawed down to a shape that might qualify as prehistoric art. So this time, you go big, stealing a loaf of bread from inside a house. You pick your target carefully. A tiny thatched hut on the edge of the village with a slanted roof, warped wooden door, and a flickering light from inside. No barking, no movement. Ideal. You creep closer, silent. You glance up at the moon. A pale half circle. Just enough light to guide your path, not enough to betray your presence. You press gently on the door. It's unlocked, a good sign. You push, and of course, it creaks, loudly. It's like it's auditioning for a horror play. You freeze, no response. You continue. Inside is a tiny kitchen space. And there, on the counter, a woven basket of bread, your holy grail. You approach, hand extended. Then you hear it. Balk. You turn. A rooster, perched on a shelf, glaring at you with an expression that, if it could speak, would say, "So, you've come at last." You barely process it before. Whump. The rooster launches straight at your face like a feathered missile, talons first. It lands on your head, claws digging into your scalp, flapping its wings like war drums. You panic. You flail. The bread hits the floor. The rooster continues its airborne assault, seemingly determined to roost on your soul. The commotion wakes everyone. A door flies open. A wrinkled woman enters the room, wielding a ladle like a sword. Behind her, an older man stumbles out with a lantern, his face still smeared with what may be sheep balm or goose grease. You can't tell. The woman yells, "It's the thief again, the bread thief, with a rooster on his head." You don't have time to explain. The rooster still hasn't let go. You suspect it remembers you from when you loitered too long near its cousin's coop. The man throws the lantern. It misses, thankfully, but sends a very clear message. Your time to flee has arrived. You bolt. No bread, no pride. And worst of all, the rooster is still on your head. You charge out the door, slip on a wicker basket, slam your forehead on the frame, and tumble into the yard. The rooster finally dismounts, flapping off into the darkness. You lie there, wheezing, hair askew, smelling of poultry, defeat, and failure. From inside, a voice bellows, "Ring the bell!" It's him again, the stinky one who licks crumbs. A wooden alarm bell clatters. Each house has one, which is used for foxes. Or apparently, you. Lights flick on. Torches are lit. You run like your peasant life depends on it. It does. Behind you, dogs begin to bark. Somehow, the rooster joins the chase, as if it still has unfinished business. You sprint past another cottage. A kid hurls a raw potato at you. It hits. You grunt. You clamber over a fence, tumble into a ditch, and find yourself again covered in mud and shame. The mud washes off. The shame? Not so much. You sit in the ditch, panting. In the distance, voices shout. Torches flicker. You smell yourself. Smoke, sweat, burnt bread dreams, and chicken feathers. You sigh. Breaking into a peasant's home, it turns out, isn't just theft. It's a full-on gamble against ladles and chickens and whatever remains of your fragile dignity. You crawl into a nearby bush, shivering under your ragged shirt. Hunger still gnaws. But now it's joined by the sting of embarrassment. You think about your career, a long, coordinated string of failures. Roosters, your fiercest enemy yet. They don't talk. They don't warn. They just strike. You make a vow. From now on, if you see a chicken, you walk the other way. You drift off under the stars, hugging your empty sack. Not from emotion, but the itch is unbearable because a rogue feather is still tangled in your hair. After last night's chicken-related catastrophe, literal and emotional, you wake up under a bush, your hair still tangled with a few white feathers like some ridiculous mark of shame. You solemnly promise yourself, no more breaking into peasant homes. At least not the ones with chickens, or dogs, or really anything louder than you. But, as usual, your promises last as long as your stomach stays quiet. 3 hours later, when your gut lets out its fifth protest in D minor, you're back circling the village. Not out of thrill, out of desperation. Because you swear the faint scent of cabbage stew is in the air. You sniff instinctively. Turn left. Slip past a raspberry bush. Slide behind a small cottage. No dogs, no chickens, no voices. You scout the perimeter. No guards. It's just a humble wooden frame. A door latch made of fraying twine. And on the table inside, a small clay pot, steaming softly. The scent of cabbage soup is no longer fantasy. It's real. You inhale deeply and push the door. Skrrr. That sound? That's not a door creak. That's the devil playing violin with his fingernails on a chalkboard. You freeze. The door is barely halfway open, but the noise has already summoned every ghost who's ever died within 3 parishes. You gulp. Push further. The door continues, now with an even more annoying staccato. Cree-e-e-e-kf. Like it's laughing at you. You step inside. Your bare foot lands on something soft. A rug. It's not a decorative rug, a trap. Beneath it lies a bundle of wind chimes, crafted from wooden spoons, seashells, and what appears to be 2 soup ladles from retirement. Every step you take creates a cheerful, tinkling alarm symphony fit for a royal banquet. But in this context, pure doom. You freeze. Too late. A cat jumps onto the table. It doesn't meow. It just knocks over a ceramic bowl. Crash. Movement in the next room. Someone shifts in bed. You know what's next. You turn to leave, forgetting the door. Scree! Too loud. Too late. A man's voice shouts, "Who's there?" "Who's in my house?" You bolt. You trip over a basket. You bounce off the doorframe like a sack of flour. You crash into the dirt outside. Breath knocked out, cabbage soup untouched, dignity once again demolished. Behind you, wind chimes still jingle, like mocking laughter from every grandma who's ever lived here. You hide behind a haystack, heart pounding like a war drum, lungs gasping. Not from pain, from shame. You think, who designed these homes? A genius? A trap-obsessed squirrel? You start remembering past break-ins. The one with bamboo tubes tied to the roof. You brushed them and got thump, thump, thump like ceremonial drums. The house that sprinkled dry leaves and beans around the threshold. You stepped on them and sounded like a tambourine falling downstairs. One house had a ceramic pot dangling from a string linked to the door. You nudged it. It didn't break. But your pride did. Peasants might be poor, but their imagination? Rich. No guards, no locks, just noise. And you are the Mozart of setting it off. You try to tread lightly, but the wood creaks. You avoid objects, but the wind chimes are always at head height. You go barefoot, but someone always spreads crunchy millet husks across the floor like medieval bubble wrap. One day, you think you finally won. You enter a house with no door, sound, cat, or trap. You approach the table. There's bread. You pick it up. Squeak! You turn. A white rat has jumped from the cupboard. Not scary, but it landed on a hanging string, which is, of course, attached to another wind chime. Suddenly the room erupts in a cacophony of ting, 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 like a drunk wedding band. You flee. Again. You fall. Again. You get pelted with a mystery vegetable. Again. You lie under a tree afterward, arm over your eyes, staring at the only place left without wind chimes, the sky. You whisper, "I just want one silent door, please." A breeze rustles the leaves. One falls gently onto your face, and from far away, kriak. You flinch. It's not an actual door, just your trauma resurfacing. You decide, next time, try the window. If you're lucky, it'll be chicken-free. If unlucky, maybe just a surprise bucket to the head. You drift to sleep, dreaming of stealthy steps and antique shops filled with cursed wind chimes. And you, still trying to tiptoe like a lost ninja in a world made entirely of squeaky floors and vengeful poultry. You used to think thieving was a game between you and your victim. You were clever. They were careless. But over time, you realized you weren't battling people. You were battling props, not the theatrical kind, but an entire arsenal of homemade booby traps engineered by mud hut geniuses with suspicious minds and zero faith in their neighbors. Tonight, your target is a humble little hut with wooden walls, a thatched roof, and laundry drying outside. This means that if someone lives here, there's probably food, and if you're lucky, maybe even a lonely crust of stale bread dangling somewhere in reach. You sneak around back. No door, no wind chimes. A promising start. You place a hand on the windowsill, tiptoe through, snap. Beneath your heel is a perfectly placed twig, positioned with the surgical precision of someone who once lost a turnip and vowed revenge. It cracks like a squirrel's spine during drama club auditions. Instantly, from the rafters, sploosh, a bucket of water crashes down on you. Now you're drenched, like a sad alley cat mid-thunderstorm. But the worst isn't over. The splash wakes everyone. A child shrieks. An old woman screams, "Thief!" like you just robbed her ancestors' bones. An older man leaps from bed, wielding a broomstick. He trips over you and crashes into the hearth. You slither out the window like a snake having a breakdown. You sprint into the cold, your clothes soaked, your scent a nostalgic blend of mildew and week-old onion. The kind of resume fragrance that screams, "Don't hire me." You dive into an abandoned cattle shed, wheezing like a buffalo who just got expelled from school, and ask yourself, is this karma? Or did the villagers all attend Advanced Home Security 101 together? A few days later, you try again. This time, it's a home near the brick kiln, the doors ajar. No light. You slip in silently and nearly cry when you spot a tiny loaf of bread. You inch toward it, trembling with joy. Then, thunk. You've stepped on what looks like a harmless welcome mat, but is a dried porcupine skin. You scream, but only on the inside. Spines pierce your heel like divine commentary from God himself. Thieves shall suffer. You hop backward, knocking over the table. The bread tumbles and a full rack of wooden spoons topple behind it like drunk dominoes. You limp outside in shame. You are no longer a thief. You are a wounded beast, hobbling, groaning, and smelling faintly of rendered goat fat. You're bedridden for a week. Each step is a curse. You try twisting the quills with sticks, but some barbs cling to your foot like spiteful memories. You consider giving up, but your stomach doesn't. A few days later, you circle a home with a veggie garden. You spot a single carrot peeking out of a basket by the window. You don't plan to break in, just gently tug it. You grab it, yank whoosh, a net made of twine drops from the roof. You are caught, tangled like a chicken ready for roasting, dangling a full meter above the ground, legs swinging like festive temple bells. The homeowner steps out, a young man holding a mug of beer. He stares at you, sighs. This was for catching foxes. Didn't expect to catch this. You try to plead, but you're suspended in midair, and the dust from the thatch roof has joined your tears and snot in an unholy facial cocktail. He leaves you there. 10 minutes, then cuts the rope. You drop like a sack of unlabeled flour. No one yells, no one throws things, just quiet disappointment, and a dry piece of bread tossed out the back door, a silent message. Don't come back. You eat it with your head bowed, not out of humility, but because moving too fast makes the remaining porcupine quills stab you like tiny, vengeful knives. That night you lie on your usual hay pile, hugging your foot, staring up at the ceiling and wondering, am I a thief or a failed cartoon mouse caught in endless slapstick traps? You no longer fear punishment, you fear creativity. The villagers have turned their homes into fortresses, not with locks, but with dried coconut shells, banana strings, and weaponized imagination. You swear you'll pull off a theft one day without hitting a single trap. But today is not that day. You drift to sleep and dream of a labyrinth made entirely of snares. With every step, a snapping twig. Every doorknob wired to wine chimes. Every welcome mat is secretly a porcupine waiting for revenge. After a long string of disasters involving welcome mats, you thought you'd seen it all. Anything with feathers or a voice no longer scared you. Chickens? Been there. Dogs? Routine. Cats? Occasionally helpful. You figured no creature in this village could shake you anymore. That was before you met the goose. The goose. A creature that looks like a swan after budget cuts. Long neck, sideways eyes, wings like a wrestler's arms, and a beak that could give any medieval weapon a run for money. That evening, your target was a small hut near the village pond. No dogs, no wind chimes. The door was slightly ajar, practically inviting you in. A basket of vegetables hung beside the table and a pie on it. It's a real pie. Golden crust, glossy top, steaming gently like a dream you once had when your stomach wasn't trying to eat itself. You looked around. Silence. Birds chirped faintly in the distance. A soft breeze. A perfect night for crime. You crept closer, one step, another, hand reaching for the pie honk. You froze. Not a chicken, not a human. You slowly turned your head. There it was. A white goose, the size of a beer barrel standing in the doorway. It wasn't just looking at you. It was judging you. Beak slightly open, neck raised like it was challenging the gods themselves. You took a step back. The goose stepped forward. You whispered, "It's not your pie." The goose honked louder and charged like a living javelin. Before you could react, its beak clamped onto the hem of your tunic and yanked hard. You fell backward, smacking the vegetable basket and sending the pie into a tragic airborne spiral. The goose didn't care. It climbed onto you, beak slapping your face, feet clawing your arms. Your neck is coiled around yours like some kind of poultry python. You tried to shove it off, but every push made it angrier. It honked louder, a sound of war. And to your horror, another honk responded. Not just one. 2 more geese sprinted in from the side of the house like a feathered SWAT team. Now, it wasn't theft. It was survival. You flung the pie, tossed your sack, shed your tunic. Nothing worked. To them, you were not a thief. You were the enemy. You barreled through the cabbage patch, hurdled a fence like an Olympic hopeful, slipped into a muddy ditch. But one goose was still on you. Its beak felt forged by the royal blacksmith. You screamed, "I'm sorry! I don't even want the pie anymore." It honked in reply. And the honk did not sound forgiving. You finally spotted an abandoned woodpile. You dove into it, shivering like a wet squirrel. The goose stopped at the edge, glaring at you like memorizing your face, then turned and walked away, deliberately, calculatedly, as if to say, "This isn't over." You lay there, breathless, collar torn, tiny scratch bleeding, dignity reduced to ash. The next morning, you emerged with hair tangled and eyes hollow. A child pointed at you and asked his mother, "Is that man possessed?" You said nothing. Your brain echoed with one phrase, "The goose remembers." You thought they forgot? Wrong. Every time you passed near that house, even from 50 meters away, the lead goose would lift its head and honk, clear and cold. That one, it's him. You tried switching villages. No one told you. Geese have relatives. The next village? Another goose? You barely set foot in a garden, and it appeared. No hesitation, no warning, like your scent of failure had reached every feathered cousin in the region. You developed a new skill, recognizing goose footsteps from afar. One faint honk, you veered left. A scratching sound? You climbed a tree. A moving white shape? You dug a hole and waited it out. Chickens have pecked you, chased by dogs, shamed by wind chimes. But no creature has ever made you afraid from a distance like a goose. They don't forget, they don't forgive, and they have claws. You swore an oath, if it's white and feathered, back away. If the beak curves, turn around. If you hear honk, run like you stole the Pope's tiara. That night, you lay beneath a tree, sack empty, legs sore from scratches, throat stinging from peck marks. And you finally realized, the highest skill in the thief's trade isn't stealth. It's knowing when to run before the beak finds your face. After the surprise goose ambush that nearly sent you to the afterlife over a stolen pie, you convinced yourself that the worst was over. But you forgot something crucial. Every peasant is a living, breathing motion sensor in a medieval household. And their weapon of choice? Not a sword, not a dagger, a wooden spoon. That night, you were hungry again, like every night. And, like a poorly conditioned reflex, you returned to the plan. Sneak light, grab fast, no pleasantries. You set your sights on a modest two-room house with a slightly ajar wooden door. You'd passed it a few times. The smell of stewed cauliflower and toasted bread floated in the air like a gentle trap. No dogs, no geese, no chickens, not even a squeaky door. For the first time in days, all signs pointed to success. You nudged the door open. No sound, a faint glow from fading embers. On the table sat, oh heavenly mercy, a bowl of lukewarm porridge with a wooden spoon still in it, as if whispering, "Come closer. No one will know." You crept forward like a cat in rags, sat down. I lifted the spoon. I took a bite, warm, slightly salty, something between turnip and boiled duckfoot. You didn't ask. It was delicious. Second spoonful, and a chew, not you, from the next room. You froze. You hadn't heard a soul. But now you knew. Someone was only lightly sleeping. You put the spoon down, prepared to back away. Bang! The side door flung open. A boy, maybe 7, wandered out rubbing his eyes. Saw you. You saw him. He saw you. You smiled your most non-threatening stranger smile. He didn't smile back. He turned and screamed, "Mom!" You didn't even stand before a second door burst open. A woman stormed out, brandishing a giant wooden spoon, used to stir a stew meant for 6 and defend a household meant for 3. Her eyes flared like firestones. "Who are you?" You bolted upright, ready to flee. But from the far side, a grandpa shuffled in. sleep hat askew, holding another wooden spoon. Smaller, stiffer, sharper. Catch him! You're not sure who yelled it, but suddenly you were being chased around a tiny house by 3 generations, 3 spoons, and 3 levels of commitment. You dodged the first swing. The big spoon whooshed past your hair. You ducked, forehead smacked the table. You stumbled back and stepped into the porridge bowl, slipped like a sock puppet on an oiled ramp. You crawled out the door. You thought you could escape. Wrong. No one went back to bed. They all followed. Even the boy, wielding a toy wooden spoon, whacking the air like it meant business. No one screamed. They just shouted one damning phrase. It's him! The one who got pecked by the chicken. Oh no. You thought that story was buried. Lanterns lit up. Neighbors peeked out. One old lady hurled a turnip. A young man threw salt. You ran like the wind, if the wind had stubbed toes and limps. Caught on a fence, ripped your pants. Dignity is now full of holes. You collapsed behind the old cowshed, wheezing. And for the first time in your life, you feared the spoon. Not because it was sharp, but because it was everywhere. You looked down. A bruise, spoon-shaped, throbbed on your arm. You thought, maybe this profession should be renamed freelance spoon collector. Unwilling. From that night on, you paid attention. Is there any house with wooden spoons hanging outside? That was a house with someone ready to throw hands, or at least throw ladles. You tried a new village. It didn't help. An older woman spotted you from across a field and called out, "Bring the spoon, girl." I think it's him. You hadn't even done anything yet. You just made eye contact with your fear of spoons. You spiraled. Another night, you successfully stole a single boiled egg. You sat down to eat in peace. But from a nearby bush, a child emerged, holding guess what? A spoon. They didn't swing. I just held it up. And you dropped the egg. I ran like a cursed rabbit. Screamed, "Why is this happening?" You asked yourself, am I afraid of people? Or of kitchenware? You concluded, in the Middle Ages, the wooden spoon was not just a utensil. It was the people's anti-theft defense system, affordable, multi-purpose, and always within arm's reach. That night, you lay under the stars. No sack, no bread, just hugging an old wooden spoon, not as loot, as therapy. You whispered, "Peace begins with understanding." And you fell asleep, dreaming that you were a wooden spoon, fleeing from a vengeful flock of geese trying to reclaim their pie. After all the chases, the dogs, the chickens, the geese, and the flying spoons, you thought maybe, just maybe, the universe would cut you some slack. But no, because in the medieval universe there was one clear rule: don't get caught. And you, of course, got caught. Not while stealing bread, not a mid-onion heist, but while dozing off under a bridge. A fishmonger spotted you. I have no idea what tipped her off, but 5 minutes later, you were yanked out of a dream filled with butter and warm blankets by 3 burly men, one of whom was still wearing a bloody apron, hopefully pig blood. You struggled, mumbling, "I was just sleeping." But it was no use. You were recognized, not by your face, by your smell. A child pointed and shrieked, "Mom, it's the guy the chicken pecked." That was it. They tied your hands, dragged you through the market, past all the homes, kitchens, and turnip baskets you'd once visited. Everyone watched with expressions ranging from pity to downright joy. One older woman whispered, "I used to think he was cute. Big mistake." You were hauled in front of the judge, the village chief, a man with 3 beards, one on his lip, one on his chin, and one floating in his beer. He listened to a few vague accusations and didn't ask for proof. You opened your mouth to defend yourself. He raised a hand. "4th time this month. I think it's time we gave you a more permanent marker." Someone lit a fire before you could ask what marker meant. A branding iron was shoved into the embers, bent at the tip, shaped like a T. At first you thought, T for terrible mistake. But no. They explained simply, T for thief. You panicked. Wait! I only took small things, and half the time I didn't even get away with it. No one listened. They held you down, pressed your cheek against a table. You felt the heat nearing. Then, ssssh. That sound, if you've heard it, you never forget. That smell, scorched flesh and humiliation, burned itself into your memory like, well, a brand. You screamed. Not just from pain, though, yes, it hurt. But because, from that moment on, everyone would see you as a thief, even if you were just standing there, breathing. The iron left a swollen, angry T on your left cheek, ugly, red, and shaped like shame itself. It throbbed. But the shame? That would last a lot longer. They let you go right after. Free, they said. But how free can you be when every face you pass stares at you, squints at your cheek and says, T, that means thief, right? You tried covering it with a rag. But the rag was torn, and the wind loved revealing secrets. You tried wearing a hat, but cheap medieval hats didn't cover much, and somehow it made you look even more suspicious. You passed a blacksmith shop. The smith glanced up and snorted. Got burned, huh? Next time, steal from someone else. You walked past a small abbey. A nun saw your face and crossed herself, not to bless you, but to ward you off. You wanted to cry, but you were too dehydrated to make tears. That night, you curled under the eaves of a house whose owners were away. Even a cat walking by froze at the sight of the tea glowing in the moonlight. It changed course. You dreamt of being a child again, eating porridge with your grandmother. Before, tea meant anything. But in the dream, she turned and said, "Eat quickly, dear, before the thief comes." You jolted awake. I couldn't fall asleep again. From the next day, people avoided you. Even the kids stopped throwing vegetables. Now they just pointed and backed away. You tried a new village. Fresh start? You hadn't even reached the market when a child shouted, "Mom!" That man's face, "It's on fire." You sighed. Whether you stole again or not, you were already a walking conviction. That tea was a stain you'd never scrub off. Every stare whispered the same thing. We know who you are, and we won't forget. You sat beside a muddy field, watching your warped reflection ripple in the water. That branded letter on your cheek, like a signature you never agreed to sign. You thought, maybe getting whipped would have been better. At least that's a private kind of shame. You let out a bitter laugh. Then, lay back in the grass, hugged your torn sack, and whispered, "T is for tired." T stood for thief. But to you, it might as well stand for the end. Because ever since that hot iron kissed your cheek, you weren't just a petty criminal anymore. You were the guy with the T, a walking signpost, a two-legged public service announcement, and worst of all, an extremely recognizable target. You tried walking around the market like a normal person. I'm just browsing vegetables and not touching anything. The cabbage seller shouted, "Hey, back off! The tea face is here." You went to the village well, hoping for a ladle of water. The well keeper looked you over and casually placed the ladle inside the well. Translation: if you want a drink, dive in. You passed a bread stand. A cat sprawled on a straw mat opened one eye and looked at you. Not in a "hey buddy" kind of way. No, the stare said, "I've seen your failures. I've counted them. I'm wondering why you're still breathing. You once thought cats were indifferent. But now, even cats seem judgmental." You sat under a tree, watching the village kids play stick throw. You didn't say anything, didn't move. But one kid whispered to another. Soon, the gang turned to stare at you, with that mix of fear, curiosity, and the look kids reserved for the monsters their grandma told them stories about. You tried begging for crumbs outside a tavern. The innkeeper didn't yell. They didn't even say no. He just pointed at your cheek and said, "You think my customers want to eat with that face watching?" You walked away. You used to fear guards, dogs, geese. But now you feared villagers' eyes, a side glance, a furrowed brow, a neck crane to confirm what they think they saw. Every one of them was a paper cut to whatever pride you had left, as thin as a potato sack string. One afternoon, you sat alone, eating a crust of bread you'd bought with the literal last coin in your bag. An older woman passed by. She stared, then muttered, "Sinful, eating with stolen hands." You wanted to shout, "No, I paid for this." But she wasn't wrong, and she wasn't right. She was just everyone. You once thought hunger was the lowest point, or being chased. But no. The real rock bottom? Being hated even when you're doing nothing wrong. You walked past a rice field. A boy tending cattle ran up and asked, "Are you the famous thief guy?" You shrugged. He grinned. "They say you were pecked by a chicken and chased by geese." You nodded, stone-faced. He squinted at the scarred T on your cheek, then asked, "Did it hurt?" You replied quietly, "It did at first. Now, I'm used to it." He paused, then ran off. Tomorrow, he'd tell the whole village he met the thief. You wouldn't be a person anymore. You'd be a story. One rainy evening, you weren't stealing anything. You were just huddled under a barn awning trying to stay dry. A girl walked past with a basket, saw you, changed direction. You heard her whisper to her friend, "You can tell by the face. Touch your stuff and it's gone." You hadn't touched anything. That's when it hit you. Some of these people had never even seen you before. But they saw the T and they knew. They knew who you were, what you'd done, what you would do. Because in their minds, you'd never change. You used to wish you could disappear. Now your face had a logo. You couldn't hide. I couldn't beg. It couldn't reform. Because before you even opened your mouth, the world had already rewritten your story. Someone once said, "Freedom is the ability to be forgotten." You sighed, because you were living proof of the opposite. That night, you sat beside a tiny fire you lit with damp twigs from the forest's edge. You roasted a crust of old bread, the only thing left in your bag. A stranger passed by. I saw your face. I saw the mark, and simply said, "Oh, it's you." No name, no question, no greeting. Just one sentence. "It's you." You lowered your head. I took a bite of bread. And for the first time, your only wish wasn't for warm food or a soft bed, but that maybe one day, just one day, you could walk through a market without anyone saying, "That's him." You used to think the Middle Ages had justice. Courts, lawyers, juries. Someone in a black robe slams a gavel, yelling, "Order," like in a play. But reality? Justice came fast as a whip, hot as fried onions, and was delivered by whoever had the loudest lungs. One morning, you were walking through the market. Not stealing, really, just walking. Hands in your sack, eyes on the dirt. A silent nobody trying to stay invisible. Then a scream ripped the air. "He took my basket!" You looked up. A vegetable vendor pointed at you, hair flying like she'd been electrocuted by pure suspicion. You froze. I didn't touch anything." She didn't need to hear it. "He's got the T on his face. Who else could it be?" People spilled out from everywhere. A fish seller shouted, "Yeah, I saw him lurking near my house last week." An old onion vendor nodded wisely. He asked for porridge once. Probably a diversion tactic. No one asked where the basket was. No one looked for proof. They looked for volume. Whoever shouted loudest got to lead. Whoever told the best story was believed. And you? You couldn't get a word in. They dragged you to the center of the market, tied you to a wooden post. No punches, no kicks. They threw things. Bruised vegetables, moldy bread, curved carrots, dry onions, garlic sprouting green tips. Someone threw a weird mushroom. You're not sure if it was edible, but it hurt. A child asked, "Mom, is he a demon?" The mother replied softly, "No, sweetheart, he's a lesson." You laughed bitterly, tears in your eyes. Because the only thing you stole today was your silence. Someone shouted, "Hang him from the tree so he remembers." Another chimed in, "No need. Post a sign. Village thief number 1. Let everyone see." No one said, "Let's wait for a trial." No one said, "Do we have evidence?" Because in their eyes, the trial ended the day the tea was seared into your cheek. You were lucky. One older woman mumbled, "Let him go. He looks half-starved." But an older man barked, "So what? Starving thieves are still thieves." Everyone nodded. Logic didn't need to be airtight, just loud enough. They released you after an hour of public humiliation. No whips, just words, and stares, and carrots. You limped out of the market, clothes crusted with soup vegetables, a broken eggshell balanced perfectly on your head. You muttered to yourself, "Why does justice around here feel more like lunch than law?" You crawled into an old storage shed near the stables, curled up, and stared into the dark. You used to dream of being a hero, a knight, or at least a guy who sold bread. Now, you were a walking target. That night, you tried to sleep. But every time you closed your eyes, you heard voices shouting, "The tea! The tea!" It was a nightmare, with background music. You dreamed you were in a courtroom. The judge was a chicken. The jury was a group of geese. The guards were cats. And the executioner? An older woman is holding a giant wooden spoon. You jolted awake, gasping. You swore to yourself, "I'm never setting foot in that market again." But hunger doesn't respect declarations. By morning, it was knocking again. You thought about disguises, cover your face, change your voice, or maybe just move to a new village. But you had nothing, just your torn sack and a couple of lonely beans clinking in your pocket. You went with the least risky option. Ask the monastery for porridge. You arrived, bowed your head at the gate. A monk stepped out. "I saw your face. I saw the tea." He turned away. No scolding, no hitting, no porridge, just turned. And that's when you realized, mob justice doesn't end when the crowd goes home. It sticks to you, it follows you, it lives on your face. You sat on the stone steps, arms around your growling stomach. A cat came and stared at you. Its eyes said, "You earned this." You nodded. "I know." After that glorious public sentencing full of carrots and humiliation, you thought you'd hit rock bottom. But no. Because in medieval times, there was one thing even more feared than angry geese or flying gossip. The stocks. Not the financial kind. It's not a kitchen device. The wooden torture bench of shame. A big wooden frame with 3 holes. 1 for your neck, 2 for your wrists, where you'd be locked and put on public display like a failed art project. You were locked in on a Monday morning, right in front of the main village market. That day's weather was a masterpiece of misery. Bright sun, gusty wind, and the scent of cow dung blowing over from the village's far side. You tried to stay calm, but the moment your head slid into the hole and the wooden beam snapped shut, 3 things hit you. First, numbness. Second, itching. Third, deep, spiritual discomfort. You stood there like a trembling statue. A small boy walked by and asked his mother, "Mom, what are they doing to him?" She replied, loudly, for everyone to hear, "Teaching him that stealing isn't fun." The boy stared, then hurled half an apple straight at your face. It hit you square on the nose. You wanted to yell, but your neck said no. An older man wandered over and reached into his pocket. You hoped for kindness. He pulled out an onion. Of course, an onion. He chuckled. "You stole onions from my house. Here, have one back." He threw it. It spun like a discus and smacked your cheek, right where the branded tea sat. You heard a pop. It might have been the onion. It might have been your last shred of self-worth cracking. By noon, the sun turned the world into a brick oven. Sweat dripped from your brow to the wooden floor below. You couldn't wipe it. Flies showed up. One landed on your nose and just stayed, like it had bought a VIP ticket. An older woman took pity on you and offered a carrot. You felt hope. It was a rotten carrot. She placed it gently before your face, smiling. Eat. It'll soften your insides. You didn't want to, but hunger is stronger than dignity. You bent down. I took a bite. It was soggy, sour, slightly alive. You stopped chewing, swallowed your tears, and the carrot. A gang of kids ran by shouting, "Hey, it's the thief that got chased by chickens." You groaned. One threw an eggshell, another threw an actual egg. You no longer questioned why the village always had spare eggs. Later, a group of harvesters passed by. They stopped and stared. One said, "He once slept in our granary." Another added, "Yeah, I saw him hiding in a firewood cart." Someone else chimed in, "I once gave him leftover bread. Big mistake." You thought, "I used to be a person. Now I'm the village newsletter." The sun dipped low. Your stomach howled. Your back ached. Your neck stiffened. Your wrists bled from the rough wood. You looked around for a shred of compassion. You saw a cat sitting on a stone, staring at you. It nodded slowly, not with pity, not with hatred. It's just mutual recognition. A breeze blew through. You shivered. The guard yawned and walked off to get a beer. You sighed. Everything blurred from exhaustion and the smell of egg yolk. Night fell. The throwing stopped, but the mosquitoes arrived. They feasted from your cheek to your forehead, wrists to your collarbone. The buzzing in your ears was the saddest lullaby of the 14th century. At some point you passed out, dreamed you were a carrot, rotten, bitten, then thrown back at yourself. Morning came. They unlocked you, not out of mercy, just because your time was up. You sat up, trembling, limbs like broken sticks. The first face you saw was the kid with the apple. He grinned. "No one to throw things at today. I'm kinda sad." You didn't answer. You walked off like someone who left half their soul in a wooden cage. Each step whispered a lesson. Sometimes the pain isn't just punishment. It's being punished in front of everyone, by the things that were meant to be eaten. You returned to the old straw barn. Laid down. I couldn't sleep, because your neck still remembered the feel of wood. You stared at the leaky roof and thought, "If I get a next life, please, let me be a spoon seller." Just when you thought the medieval stocks were the peak of public humiliation, you were wrong. Because in the Middle Ages, rock bottom was simply the prelude to the next punishment. You were released from that infamous wooden frame on a foggy morning. The sky itself looked ashamed, as if even the heavens pitied you. Your neck throbbed, your arms tingled, and your legs waddled like an unemployed goose. When the town guards showed up, you barely reached your usual tree stump nap spot. Not because you stole again, but because the villagers still weren't done being angry. The village headman suggested quite calmly, "Let's give him a few lashes, just so he remembers." No one objected. No complaints are needed. No trial. Just vibes. They dragged you up and tied your hands to a post. But this time, it wasn't for display. It was for counting. The flogger? The village oxman. Built like a wine barrel with arms, hands like shovels, and above all, a man who enjoyed his work. He gave you a wink. Relax. Just a few to warm you up. Then, whack. You gasped, not from pain, not yet. From the shock of it. The whip was twisted from coarse hemp with knots at the end. Each lash wasn't just punishment. It was a sermon delivered through your spinal column. You screamed. Nobody cared. The market buzzed on. You begged them to stop. A passerby tossed you an apple. You were touched, until you saw the bite marks. From a rat. After 10 lashes, your back burned, your breath staggered, your vision blurred. They untied you. Freedom, medieval style. As in, you can lie there. Just don't die. You dragged yourself away. Your shirt, already thinner than honesty, now featured fashionable open-back fringe, courtesy of the whip. You slumped under the overhang of a cow barn. A girl walked by, saw your back and muttered, "Still alive? Lucky thief." You didn't argue. You just smiled like a tree that's accepted being eaten by termites. But fate wasn't finished with you. You were about to get a degree in public shame, advanced level. 2 days later, a serious theft occurred. A bronze pot vanished. No witnesses, no evidence. But an older man emerged and pointed a shaking finger at you. I didn't see him steal it, but his face looks very guilty. The village nodded. A quick meeting followed. Swift conclusion. Let's make him a living warning sign. You didn't understand at first, until they led you to the village gate. There, a tall wooden frame had been prepared, not to hang you by the neck, just to hang you, period. They tied a rope around your waist and hoisted you up like a grain sack, except grain doesn't scream. Next to you, they nailed a sign. "This is a thief. Don't be like him." Children pointed and giggled. Adults nodded in approval. One older man even drew a mustache on your face with charcoal. You dangled gently in the wind, like a flag from a nation that had already surrendered. A cow walked past, looked at you, and walked off with the kind of shrug only a creature without shame can give. And that was the most shameful part. You stayed up there all afternoon. The wind blew, flies arrived, your neck ached, your hands went numb. And worst of all, you were hungry. No one threw food. No one offered water. A child asked, if I gave him a slice of bread, would that make me an accomplice? Their mother replied, "No, dear, but bread is for the deserving." You thought, being a warning sign and still not getting bread. That's harsh even for this century. When the sun dipped low, they finally took you down. Not because you were forgiven, but because you smelled. And a bird had perched on your shoulder. You collapsed on the ground, too weak to stand. The guard said, "If you steal again tonight, we'll hang you back up tomorrow." You didn't respond, because your lips were full of dirt, your back was full of dried blood, and your heart was full of the permanent T stamped into your life. That night, you curled up in the rotting straw. You dreamed you were a wooden sign. It read, "Warning, life is cruel." Some jobs keep you busy, some jobs wear you out. But being a thief in medieval times, it makes you run, constantly. Not a jog for health, not a sprint for glory. You run to avoid getting hanged, whipped, or having a charred turnip frisbee into your face. That night, you were only aiming for a single turnip, just one, from the blacksmith's garden. Nothing fancy, no rot, no stink, no barking dog. You slipped through the fence. Then it happened. "He's back again!" A shout exploded into the night as if someone had blown a horn made of sheer panic. You froze. Torchlight, footsteps, and the dreaded screech, "Tougher thief!" You ran. No planning, no route, just go. Here's the problem. Medieval village roads are not roads. They are a cruel mix of straw, old cow dung, sleeping pigs, and mystery puddles that are not rainwater. Your first step lands on a tilted shovel. It launches you forward. You somersault through pig manure. But you get up, because survival is stronger than shame. Behind you, someone yells, "Cut him off up top!" You swerve left. Mistake. You crash into a group of piglets. They scream like war horns. Mama Pig hears. And if a mother pig has never chased you, imagine a hairy cannonball fueled by maternal vengeance. You leap a fence, land in a mud pit, slide through it like a wet sock on the tile. Then, wham! You hit something. A chamber pot. Lidless. You will need 3 days to forget that smell. Still running, you turn into an alley. Wrong again. Public latrine district. In medieval times, public toilets had bad attitudes and were holes in the ground. You slip. Almost fall in. Thank the rotting wooden edge for partially saving your dignity. You crawl out. Shoes, dead. Shirt, changed color. You. Unsure if you're fleeing for your life or your honor. You stumble across a drying yard. Lines of wet laundry. You crash through them like a low-budget ghost. An older woman appears, brandishing a broom. "He's wrinkling my tablecloths." You roll, untangle yourself from a frilly sheet, and keep going. Heart pounding. Vision blurred with sweat, dust, and unmentionables. Then, a hay cart. Salvation. You dive in, hide, hold your breath. The cart starts moving. Someone is pushing it. You stay still. Maybe you'll escape. Then click. You open your eyes. A chicken is perched on your chest. Looking at you, it remembers. "Bok, bok, thief!" Rough chicken translation. You scream. Leap out. Hay explodes like a barn exploded. People flood the street like it's a festival. A man waves a lantern. That's the guy who slipped in cow poo earlier. You dart around a corner, straight into a clothesline. Underwear, socks, and a tunic wrap around your face. You stumble. Now you're a scarf-wearing failure. You spot an empty barrel, dive in, breathless. Eyes shut, heart pounding like a cathedral bell. A cat peers in. It shakes its head. Then, a whisper. He's hiding in the barrel. Someone lifts the lid. They don't hit you. They laugh. An older woman chuckles. A thief who doesn't know village shortcuts has no place in the village. You crawl away, like a fish flung from a net, wet, humiliated, and done. That night, you lie under your favorite tree, shivering, bruised, wrapped in a blanket of exhaustion. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a whisper. That's him, the guy who ran from pigs, poo, and people, only to end up in a toilet alley. You exhale, rest your head on your empty sack, and think, I'm not a thief anymore. I'm an unwilling Olympic hurdler in the medieval games. In the Middle Ages, you didn't need a map. You just needed instinct. Unfortunately, your instinct was like a blindfolded cow charging a fence, fast, confident, and completely wrong. After countless nighttime chases, you've learned one brutal truth. There is no such thing as a safe alley in this village. No shortcut is truly short, and every narrow path ends with you getting humiliated. Tonight is no different. You're reaching for a loaf of bread through a window. I haven't even touched it yet, when a dog, from where, erupts and barks like it just got a raise. Lights flicker on, the homeowner yells, and boom, you're running. For the 1,105th time, you dart left, into a narrow alley you thought led to the back garden. New problem. The villagers recently added a wall. You slam into a brick like a sack of regret. You turn to escape, only to see a group of villagers blocking the exit. They've brought torches, and spoons, and that specific, I need a hobby so I hunt thieves energy. Desperately, you look around. One option left, a short wooden door at the alley's end. You shove it open. You regret everything. It's a public latrine. Yes, that one. It's the same one you nearly fell into a few nights ago. Except this time you walked in willingly, making it worse. Nobody's inside. But the smell? Oh, the scent has taken up residence. It hangs in the air like a cursed fog. You gag. You retreat into the darkest corner, trying not to touch anything. Outside, footsteps, voices. They stop at the door. Where'd he go? Another replies. Dunno. Maybe he dove into the hay pile? Someone jiggles the latrine door. You stop breathing. The door cracks open and slams shut again. No one could survive in there, unless he's a demon with no nose. You sit motionless, covered in something that dripped from the ceiling. You don't know what it is. You refuse to guess. You huddle there for what feels like an eternity. Eventually, the voices fade. You slip out, smelling like a peasant's worst nightmare, looking like a survivor of the world's grossest steam bath. You crawl from the alley like a snake, barely passing an obstacle course from hell, and you decide, no more running, not because you're tired, but because there's nowhere left to run. You think, why is it that every place I hide ends up being a dead end? Is karma spatial? The next day, you're caught again. Why? Because you stood too close to the onion cart. That's it. That's the whole crime now. You reactively bolt, as always. You turn into a different alley. This one, you're sure, leads out of the village. You run and run until your foot lands on something squishy. You look down, cow dung. You look up, a brick wall. You look behind, a goat, staring at you, judging you. Another dead end. But you don't scream. You just pluck a blade of grass, sit in the corner, and await your fate. When the villagers arrive, they pause. One child asks, "Why isn't he running?" An older woman sighs, "He's probably just done." They don't hit you. This time they just shake their heads and leave. You drag yourself out of the alley at midnight. Your hands are muddy. Your legs smell like a goat. Your nose? It has completely shut down to preserve sanity. You sleep in a bush that night and whisper to yourself, "Next time I hit a dead end, I'm just going to pretend I'm a statue." At least statues don't get embarrassed. If you think being chased by one person is bad and two is just plain unlucky, an entire village has never hunted you, like it's the finals of a medieval track meet. Well, tonight, you earned that honor. It started the usual way. You were hungry, and a bag of freshly baked buns on the windowsill of the cobbler's house looked so good it should have been illegal. You knew they had a cat. Old, fat, one-eyed, with the belly of a retired monk. But you came prepared. You brought dried fish. You tossed it into the yard. The cat sniffed, purred, and rolled over like it had ascended spiritually. You smiled and quietly reached for the bag of buns. But life doesn't like quiet wins. Ding. A tiny bell rang as you lifted the bag. Immediately, the window slammed open. "There he is! The thief!" Not even 3 seconds later, another voice joined in. The leek vendor from the market, whose voice could rattle roof tiles. "He's heading toward my house." Then a third. "I see him. He's got the tea face. The thief has risen." And suddenly, you were sprinting down the village path with 12 people behind you, including a blacksmith the size of a barn door, 3 angry homemakers, 2 unemployed youths, a retired monk, and an older woman wielding a broom like it was a holy artifact. You glanced back. The older woman wasn't fast, but her eyes were. Sharp, focused, judging. You veered left. Wrong move. The villagers had tactics now. They split into flanking groups. Someone yelled, "Cut him off!" Like this was a medieval SWAT drill. You dove down a narrow trail but slipped on a wet straw. You rolled. You stood. You adjusted your tunic, now as useless as a damp napkin. A boy riding a cow cart shouted, "He's heading toward the well." A man with a bundle of green onions chased alongside you, yelling, "Stop, or I'll make you eat this whole bunch." You yelled back, "I didn't even take it. I was just smelling." They didn't care. They were invested. The mob had grown to about 25 people. You turned into another alley, but standing there was the grandma. Yes, her. 87 years old, broom nearly as tall as she was. She didn't say a word, just stared at you with eyes that whispered, "I've been waiting for this moment all my life." You tried to dodge. Too late. Her broom swiped low, a precise strike to your shin. It didn't even hurt that much. But your dignity? Shattered. You hit the ground, rolled, and before you could groan, the rest of the village caught up. They didn't beat you. They stood around, panting, pointing. The grandma planted her broom in the dirt like a victory flag. "They're fast, these young ones," she said, "but not faster than Grandma's broom." You lay there in silence, hungry, sore, emotionally deep-fried. No one even bothered with the stocks this time. You were caught live, like a wild pig. They didn't punish you, not in the usual way. They tied your hands and paraded you through the village, like a reverse hero's march. At every intersection, someone would announce, "Here he is, caught today by our 87-year-old broom queen." You nodded, like a fashion model on a medieval catwalk in a burlap sack. After 3 full laps, they let you go. not out of mercy, but because they were tired. You limped toward the abandoned woodshed. Your shoulders are still decorated with leaves from someone's cabbage patch. In your hand, half a bun, rescued mid-escape. Nobody reclaimed it, probably out of pity, or because it now smelled like shame. You sat down, nibbled the sad little bun. I looked up at the moon. It looked back. I didn't judge. I didn't mock. And you thought, if the moon had a broom, it probably would have smacked me too. After the uninvited thief parade through the village, complete with an elderly woman wielding a broom like a knighted weapon, you came to a clear conclusion. You needed to disappear. Urgently, not out of shame, but because your body had filed for surrender. Your legs were noodles, one butt cheek was bruised from a pumpkin slip, and your soul felt like a soggy loaf of bread someone had thrown in a ditch, wet, cold, and unwanted. So you limped to a forgotten dirt path behind the monastery, the place only cows and moldy fig trees cared about. In the distance, an abandoned cattle shed stood crooked, doorless, dark, and smelly. Perfect. You crawled inside, curling up in a moldy haystack, the only place in this entire kingdom that didn't chase you away. You exhaled. A chilly breeze slid in through the warped wood, bringing the scent of cow dung and damp moss, oddly comforting. It didn't judge you, didn't whisper, "There goes the thief." It just was. You closed your eyes, heavy lids, slower heart, finally, sleep. For about 3 minutes. Then something bit you. Something small, sharp, with purpose, right on your toe. You jolted up, gasping, trying not to scream. Hay rustled. Not a ghost, not a guard, mice, not one. A committee. They weren't scared of you. Probably read somewhere that you're harmless. One climbed your arm. You flung it off, only to feel 2 more scaling your leg. You kicked, spun, woke the nest, and stepped directly on a hidden mouse home. A chorus of squeak, squeak, squeak echoed from the shadows. They launched outward in panic. One ran across your face, leaving a trail of fur and a slap-like scratch on your nose. You shot out of that shed like a man escaping a burning brothel. But the night wasn't done yet. Woof. You froze. You turned. A hunting dog stood behind you, ears perked, eyes glowing like lanterns. You stepped back, slowly, carefully. The dog growled. You froze. It stepped forward. You held your breath. It barked. You ran. So there you were, a ragged thief, chased by a dog through midnight fields after being harassed by a mouse union. You tripped over haystacks, rolled, staggered, and dove into an abandoned rain barrel. The dog stopped short. I barked once more. Then I lost interest. Maybe you dropped below the worthy prey threshold. You sat in that barrel, soaked, freezing, and smelling like something between wet goat and regret. Itchy all over, unsure if it was from hay, mice, or emotional collapse. You muttered, "This is the new definition of home. Has a roof, a smell, and aggressive rodent tenants." In the distance, a rooster crowed. But no, not a real rooster. A child, imitating one, somewhere in the village, mocking you. Kids now clucked like chickens whenever you passed. One voice yelled, "Watch out! Rat-bitten thief incoming." You didn't even have the energy to be offended. You just wanted to exist in peace. At dawn, you tried returning to the cattle shed, hoping for shelter. But someone was already there. Not a villager. Another vagabond. An older man. You nodded. He nodded back, his eyes flicking to the T still stamped on your cheek. No laughter, no questions. He simply said, "I sleep in that corner. Please don't take it. T, there are snakes." You nodded again. Somehow, that felt reassuring. That night, you shared a mouse-infested barn with a man once labeled the spirit of petty theft. You split a stale biscuit. No one asked about each other's past. No one feared the mice. Because both of you know, mice don't bite those who've lost dignity, only those who still feel pain. You slept deeply, for the first time in days, and in your dream, you and the mice sat at a feast table. One poured wine, another sliced bread. They all raised a toast to a broom standing in the center. You laughed in your sleep. Then I woke up with a mouthful of hay. It didn't matter. At least tonight you didn't have to run. You wake up in a cold bed of hay, weak morning sunlight slipping through the cracks of the cattle shed, landing squarely on your left cheek, right where the T mark still burns like a permanent stamp of failure. You stretch, yawn, and realize your sack is missing. That tattered old sack. Your entire worldly inventory, a few breadcrumbs, a scavenged wooden spoon, and a scrap of fabric you'd hoped might cover the T. Gone. Along with whatever little hope you'd held on to. You scan the shed. The older man from last night is still asleep, smacking his lips like he's dreaming of roasted meat. You nudge him awake. Did someone come in here? He yawns and smacks his lips again. Probably thought. Limp in the leg, fast in the fingers. He picks pockets while you sleep. You blink. A thief. Being stolen from? He shrugs. Here, if you've never been robbed, you've never really been poor. You slump to the ground, not because of the sack, but because a painful truth just slapped you across the face. Even at the very bottom of society, there's still a bottom air. And you're it. You drag yourself out of the shed. Dust coats you from shoulders to ankles. You cough as a bit of hay enters your nose. Just as you're about to limp away, a familiar figure scurries across the garden's edge. Bent back, limping gait, carrying a sack that looks very much like yours. You shout, "Hey!" That sack. That's mine. The figure, thought no doubt, gives you the most innocent, punchable expression and bolts. You chase him, not for the sack, for your dignity. The only thing still barely clinging to you after 24 miserable episodes of your life. That's surprisingly quick, despite his limp. You dart through narrow alleys, past mustard greens, nearly stomp on a sleeping cat, who wakes just to glare at you like, "Oh, it's your turn now." And finally, corner him by the village's stone wall. You snatch the sack, rip it open. Empty. You look at him. He looks at you, both panting. Thought shrugs. Thought you had food. Turns out you're even hungrier than I am. You nod, breathless, offering a tired smirk. "Welcome to the bottom." He chuckles. "Yeah, but at least I don't have a big old T stamped on my face." You can't decide whether to laugh or cry. Instead, you reach into your sleeve and pull out your wooden spoon. Turns out you stashed it separately. You raise it like a knight unsheathing his only weapon. "Still got my spoon." Thought eyes it, then nods with solemn respect. Tool of a true survivor. You both sit on a roadside rock, saying nothing, watching the fields where villagers harvest onions, from the patch you once considered plundering. You sigh and brush the sweat and dust-crusted hair from your brow. "I think I'm done." Thought squints. "With what?" "The thieving life." He smirks. "And do what? Motivational speaker?" You shrug. "Maybe a warning sign." He snorts. "You'd make a great one." You don't argue, because he's right. Later, you split a stale piece of bread with him, one you'd pocketed yesterday. He trades you a candle stub, more valuable than gold at night if you don't want to step on a sleeping cat. You think to yourself, maybe this is the most wholesome version of thievery, trading stuff no one else wants to steal. That night, you and Thought curl up in an abandoned firewood shack. Just before falling asleep, he whispers, "You regret any of it?" You reply, "Yeah, but not for stealing, just for being stolen from." You both chuckle and drift off. The wind whistles through the planks. A rat scurries past your feet. No one cares. You fall into a deep sleep, dreaming of chasing a thief through a dark forest, only to catch him and realize he's you. After being robbed by another thief and splitting a piece of dry bread the texture of a whetstone, you came to a deep realization. Being poor alone is misery. Being poor with others, still misery, but slightly less lonely. Thought, the pickpocket who had emptied your sack just the night before, told you he knew of a hideout for the petty thieves of the region. A professional group, he said. A place where you could learn to survive, lay low, and most importantly, share stale food without getting jumped. You had nothing left to lose, except a wooden spoon and your last shred of faith in humanity, which had already fallen off around episode 12. So, you followed him, through a scrappy forest trail, along a dry canal, and finally, a cluster of old goat hides is stretched under a great oak. Welcome to the free and slightly smelly Nomadic Thieves Association. No slogans, no uniforms, just an old pot, a soggy onion stump, and a faded cloth scrap with rule number 1 scrawled in charcoal. No backstabbing, unless there's pie. You sat down. The members numbered 7. 1. A squat man named Lem exclusively stole rope. Not useful, just passionate. 2. An elderly couple once famed for stealing eggs without cracking them. 3. A chubby woman called Moo, half blind but with ears sharp enough to hear a pastry hit the ground. 4. And Thought, now acting as your cheerful sponsor. They all looked at you. It's not hostile, but it's not exactly welcoming either. One scratched his head. You ever rob a famous house? You replied, a goose once chased me. They all nodded solemnly. One whispered, who among us hasn't? You were accepted into the crew after swearing loyalty, by splitting the last piece of dry onion in your pocket. That night, you sat by the fire and listened to their glory days. 1. Caught 3 times. 2. Escaped the stocks once. 3. I ate an entire loaf of bread undetected, because the owner had a 3-day fever and didn't wake up. But they all shared one thing. They'd been cast out by their villages, pecked by chickens, branded as untrustworthy, and couldn't get hired to do anything, even dung shoveling. You thought, this isn't a crime syndicate. This is a support group for social failures. The next morning, the crew planned a raid on the monastery garden. Lem declared, target 1 basket of turnips. Moo nodded. Heard the west leaves rustle at 3 a.m. winds favorable. You asked, anyone watching for dogs? Silence. You sighed. Of course it's me. The mission was a complete disaster. You got chased by dogs. That tripped on a root. Mew fell into the fence, and the team walked away with 1 half-eaten wormy turnip. It was raffled. You won. You took a bite. Your mouth itched for 2 days. The following day, Thought invited you on a solo mission, a quick grab at the grain store near the market. You agreed, partly out of hunger, partly because you hadn't learned a single thing from your life. Footsteps echoed behind you while you were quietly lifting a sack of millet. You turned. A guard. You turned again. That was gone. The only thing left behind? A crumpled piece of bread. You got caught, but by some miracle the guard was drunk. He blinked at you. Who are you? You smiled faintly. Just picking up dropped bread. He nodded, sat down, and fell asleep. You slipped away, heart cold as a winter night. Back at the camp, you glared at Thought. You left me. He shrugged. Rule number 2. If the guards show up, save yourself. Bread left behind means I'm sorry. You looked at the bread, now mostly eaten by ants. You chuckled bitterly. That night, you sat far from the fire. They didn't speak. I didn't share onions. And you started to realize this crime group wasn't like the stories. No brotherhood. There are no fair splits, just survival. And occasionally betrayal. For half a biscuit. You didn't know how long you'd stay, but you'd learned something crucial. When you're a thief, nothing is safe. Not even among thieves. One chilly morning, you woke up in a pile of straw. Your hair a tangled nest that looked like geese had vandalized it. Your back ached like you'd hauled stone up the bell tower. You turned your head. Thought was still sleeping, mouth agape, clutching a half-eaten loaf he hadn't touched in half a day. And suddenly, a thought hit you. This is rock bottom. If I slip further, I'll probably merge with the soil itself. So you made a decision. It was time to go straight. Farewell to theft. Farewell to the cowshed. Farewell to the moldy emergency bread you'd hidden under your pillow for 3 nights and still hadn't dared eat. You washed your face with dew, read, "Wipe it with your sleeve." Adjusted your clothes, which didn't help, and straightened your spine as you walked toward the village. For the first time in dozens of chapters, you walked toward people, not hiding in barrels, not crouching behind cabbage crates, and not carrying a worm-eaten turnip. You reached the village bakery. The door creaked open, and the scent of hot bread floated like a lullaby for the famished soul. You stepped forward and said, "Good morning, sir. I'd like to ask for an apprenticeship." The baker was a round-bellied man with silver whiskers and hands the size of full-sized loaves. He looked up at you, at your cheek. To be precise, the scorched T is still branded like a permanent sticker of shame. Without asking anything else, he said, "I don't hire T-marked folk." You gave a sheepish smile. "I know I've messed up, but I want to start over." He sighed. "Then start over, in another village." You nodded. Moved on. You went to the smithy. The blacksmith was hammering, sparks bursting like festival fireworks. You stood in the doorway politely. "Can I apprentice here?" "I'm good with heavy work." He paused, looked at you. "You ever hammered iron?" "Number, but I run fast." He smirked. "Yeah? And if the forge burns down, what will we say? Oh, the thief smelled the charcoal too hard?" You tried to explain, but he turned his back. "We don't burn wood just to roast thieves." You left again. You tried elsewhere. 1. The tavern. Got kicked out because your breath had suspicious undertones. 2. The monastery. They gave you porridge, then kicked you out after spotting the tea. 3. The dried fish seller. He said your presence would ruin the market for herring. You finally slumped on the stone step by the well, chin in hands, staring at the water. It reflected a gaunt face, tired eyes, and the tea now sharper than ever. A girl drawing water glanced at you, then stepped back. You didn't blame her. You just sighed. "Start over? But my start is already stamped thief grade." You tried disguises. You wore a hat. The wind stole it. You covered it with a cloth. The cloth fell off after 5 steps. You smeared mud on your face, looked like a zombie, made children cry. Finally, you pretended to be a pilgrim. But an older man looked you up and down and said, "Real pilgrims don't stare at coin purses like that." You were out of tricks. You drifted back to the village's edge, where the Thieves' Guild was still bickering over whether to steal onions or garlic tonight. You said nothing. Just sit beneath a tree, fiddling with your wooden spoon. Thought asked, "You tried?" You nodded. No one hires someone with a big red T on their face. To them, I'm a name brand. Certified thief. Thought chuckled. "Well then, welcome back. At least here, everyone's stolen from each other already." You didn't laugh, but you didn't cry either. You thought, "I tried. I did." But no one wants to forget. That night, you slept by the fire. And as you dozed off, you dreamed you were a loaf of bread. Warm, fragrant, stamped thief. People came close, sniffed, and walked away. You woke up under a bright moon. That was scratching his leg. Mew was snoring in perfect rhythm. No one asked what you'd do tomorrow. Because here, no one's waiting for your redemption. You used to think prison was the lowest form of misery. A dark, damp, flea-ridden pit of despair. But then came a rainy day, and as you sat hunched beneath an abandoned cart, you realized something profound. At least the prison has a roof. It all started with a misunderstanding. You were standing near a stall selling old cheese, not to steal it. You were just curious whether its intense aroma could overpower your own. A cranky old woman turned, saw you, with that blazing T on your cheek, and screamed, "He's trying to steal the cheese!" You didn't even get a breath in before a burly young man appeared and dragged you from the market like a sack of turnips. You yelled, "I was just looking," he replied. That's how they all start. You were hauled to the guard post, where a lazy officer was already mid-belly scratch. He glanced at you, then at your tea, and said, "You again. Lock him up." A guard asked, "Where?" "The jail's full." The officer shrugged. "It's raining." "Lock him. Outside." You couldn't believe your ears. Surely you'd misheard. Nope. You were locked up outside. Specifically, it tied to a post in the middle of the square while it poured buckets from the heavens. No roof, no cot, no blanket, no right to remain dry. The rain slapped your face like 1,000 cold insults. Water soaked your hair, collar, and already frayed tunic, which might as well have been lace. You stood there, wrists bound, feet frozen, stomach growling. A frog hopped by and looked at you like, "I live in swamps, but at least I'm not tied up in town square." You tried to slump, but the ropes held you upright. You tilted your head back and swallowed a few drops of rain. That was your second dinner. Laughter echoed from the guardhouse. Someone said, "Look at that thief. Soggier than a stray cat." You thought, "I'm not even hefty enough to be jailed. Now I'm just free." Damp decor. An older woman passed by with a basket flipped over her head like a medieval sun hat. She looked at you and muttered, "Good punishment. Let him learn what cold means." You didn't respond. You were busy counting how often your teeth had chattered at the last minute. Night fell. The rain didn't stop. You dozed off standing up and had a strange dream. You were the post itself. An owl perched on your head. Villagers came to admire you and said, "Lovely. A decorative thief. Fits the square nicely." You awoke at dawn. Your limbs were numb. Your back is soaked. Mud crept up to your ankles. A guard came out grumbling, "Morning already? Untie him or he'll die, and we'll have to bury him." You were released and collapsed face first into the mud. No one helped. You crawled like a worm thawing after frost. You looked up. A child nearby stood holding a roasted sweet potato. He hesitated, then tossed it to you. Overjoyed, you grabbed it, just as a random dog lunged and bit off half. You stared at the remaining chunk and ate it anyway, because that was all you had. You limped out of the square. No farewells, no glances. You walked through puddles, soaked and smeared, but somehow a little clearer inside. You thought, prison is awful, but at least it has walls, beds, sleep. Outdoor jail? That's a masterclass in cold. Physical and social. You returned to the straw camp at the village edge. That was poking a fire. He looked up and grinned. "Punished again?" You nodded. "No stocks, no whip. Just tied up in the rain." He raised a brow. "Sounds poetic." You sat down and held out your half-eaten sweet potato. "Want to share?" He shook his head. "Thanks, but I'm not ready to get bitten over a meal." You laughed, your first one all day. Then you collapsed onto the damp straw, still clutching your soggy dinner, and thought, "Tomorrow, maybe I'll try begging. But who's going to give anything to the living scarecrow of this village?" You once thought that if you were ever executed, at the very least, it should be solemn, quiet, dignified, like a mournful ritual to bid farewell to a human life. But then you were arrested again, not for stealing, but simply for standing too close to the Lord's bread cart. No one saw you touch anything, but just being present at the scene was enough for a sentence. No trial, no defense. No, "I'm innocent, my lord." Just one court order from the guard. "He's been in the stocks before. This time, hang him. Keep it simple." You thought they were talking about old shoes. The news that you were about to be executed spread faster than the plague. By morning, the entire village had gathered around the old gallows tree at the square, which lasted longer than the village chief's house, probably because it was better maintained. You sat in a makeshift cell, hands tied, peeking through the wooden slats. And the first thing you saw wasn't the rope, it was the sausage stand. A plump lady had set up shop early, hanging smoked sausages, garlic sausages, spicy sausages. Next to her was a man selling fried cakes and a young woman offering farewell thief badges made from wood scraps. You thought, is this an execution or the spring festival? Children ran around the gallows playing tag. One asked, "Mama, what time is the hanging?" The mother replied, "Probably after your father finishes his sausage." An older man passed by, looked at you through the slats, and nodded. He looks all right. Gentle face, just a bit thiefy. You wanted to say, "I was just standing near the bread," but then you thought, why bother? Your life, from stocks to sleeping in cow barns, being bitten by rats, chased by geese, and eating rotten carrots, had never been dignified. So, at least your death would have an audience. They dragged you out into the square. The weather was nice. Soft sun, a mild breeze, birds chirping. Perfect for a hanging. The village chief stepped up and read from a scroll. "This thief has been warned many times. Today, as an example to others, He paused. "We'll begin after lunch." The crowd groaned in unison. "Aw." And so you were tied up and left to wait. Meanwhile, villagers ate sausages, chatted, and even sketched portraits of you as souvenirs. A local artist, meaning he could draw circles and squares, was doodling you beside the gallows. He asked, "How would you like to be remembered? Solemn? Regretful? Maybe a touch of tragic nobility?" You replied, "Like someone who wants one last bite of sausage." He nodded. "Rare. I like it." Soon after, Thought showed up. He sat nearby, munching a fried cake, and winked at you. "You're about to be famous. Want me to keep the cake wrapper as a memento?" You glared at him, too tired to answer. But inside, you found it kind of funny. Even in the end, your life was still a joke. And then it rained. Fast, hard, and relentless, like a curse from the old cheese lady. People scattered, the sausage stand toppled, the badges got soaked, and the execution scroll turned mush. You were hauled back into the guardhouse. The village chief grumbled, "Can't hang anyone in this rain? The rope slips, ruins the sacred vibe." A guard asked, "Should we postpone?" Another muttered, "Or just let him go. He looks too soggy to die with dignity." In the end, they decided, postponed indefinitely. And so you weren't hanged. Not because you were innocent, not because of justice, not because someone defended you, but because of the weather. They let you go. Still with the T-scar on your cheek, still hungry, still wet, but alive. You limped back to the camp. Thought laughed. "Next time make it rain earlier. I nearly lost my bet." You lay down and sighed. Turns out, it wasn't justice that saved me. Not friendship, not redemption, just a rainstorm and a collapsed sausage stand. You chuckled softly and drifted off to sleep. This time, no geese in your dream. Just you, selling sausages. And then, one day, you realize you're old. Not the kind of old where you sit and tell stories to grandchildren, but the kind where every joint cracks when you turn over. And the village rooster no longer chases you because it thinks you're part of the fence. You're still alive. After 29 chapters of outliving forgotten dried fish, you, the petty thief once hunted by geese and nearly executed for merely standing near a loaf of bread, have aged in silence. Your hair is gray. Your eyes are dim. Your clothes are patched together with something no longer considered fabric. And the scorched tea on your cheek? Still there. Faded, but visible. You no longer steal. Not because you've turned over a new leaf, but because you can't run anymore. Even bending down to pick up your old wooden spoon, still with you after all these years, takes 5 minutes and one loud knee crack. So you do the only thing left. You beg. You sit in the market corner, where the wind sneaks in, and the flies hold summer conferences. Bowl in hand, bare feet, eyes gazing into the distance. partly to seem philosophical, mostly because you can't see anything up close anymore. People pass by. Some shake their heads, others turn away. A few curious children ask their mothers, "Mom, what was that man before?" The mother replies, "A thief. Heard of him since I was a kid." You think, "Lady, I hadn't even stolen anything when you were a kid." But who cares now? One day, someone gives you half a stale bun. You bow in gratitude, about to take a bite, when an older woman, somehow healthier than you, strides up, squinting. "How do we know you didn't steal that from someone else?" You smile. "If I had, I would have taken the whole bun." She nods, then snatches it back anyway. You sit there, staring at the flies circling your bowl. At least they don't judge you. One rainy afternoon, you take shelter under the awning of the old tavern. The innkeeper spots you and frowns. "Don't sit there. Your smell ruins my customer's appetite." You get up and hobble back to the market corner. You stand for a bit, then collapse. Not because someone pushed you, just because your legs had gone numb too long and life had drained your strength. A small crowd gathers. No one helps you up. They whisper, "Careful, he's faking it." Exactly. Old thieves are worse than young ones. Last time I lost a boiled potato. No doubt it was him. You lie there, face down in the dirt, thinking, maybe I should just die. But would they even believe I was really dead? Or would they think I was faking to steal sympathy? Finally, a child, too young to know what the T means, too young to remember being stolen from, walks up and offers you a piece of apple. You lift your head. Eyes meet. "Here, you can have it," the child says. You take it. You don't cry. But the apple is so sour it stings your heart like a memory. You nod. The child runs off. You nibble the apple, though your remaining teeth barely manage the peel. But at that moment, you don't feel cold. Don't feel ashamed. Just light. You think back on your life. It started with hunger. Then came stealing, stocks, whips, being chased by the village, bitten by dogs, rats, and then other thieves, almost hanged. Then, aging was like a life lesson no one wanted to learn. And now, you're an old beggar surrounded by flies. But you're alive. And you've lived so long that people forget why they ever hated you. They just know you're part of the village now. You doze off on a damp stone. Rain falls gently, not cold anymore. Maybe it's because you're too used to it. In your dream, you lie on a cloud. There are sausages, roasted potatoes, and a brand new wooden spoon. You breathe out gently. Thank you for joining this 30-part journey through the muddy, absurd, and quietly heartbreaking life of a medieval thief. Someone who didn't just survive, but helped a few of you sleep better each night. Now, close your eyes. If you hear the sound of roosters, rats, or a loaf of bread hitting the ground, don't worry. It's just the past saying goodbye one last time. Good night.